Chapter 200. Afraid to come out? Yi Xian had a strange expression on his face. He knew that the Left Academy emissary and the others were very, very strong, so strong that it exceeded his current understanding. But he also knew that the Sword Immortal Sister inside him was even stronger. There was no basis for it. It was just an intuition. His intuition told him that the Sword Immortal Sister was not joking when she said that she could destroy the world with a single strike. She might really be able to do it, even though he felt that destroying a world with a single strike was absurd. Who was the Sword Immortal Sister? How strong was she? That was what Yi Xian had always wanted to know. Opposite Yi Xian, the Left Academy emissary said indifferently, "What? You're a mighty Sword Immortal. Are you going to be a coward?" The mysterious woman still did not come out. Something was not right. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He knew that the mysterious woman had a bad temper. Under normal circumstances, she should have already come out. But now, she had not come out despite the Left Academy emissary's insults. It was very strange. Yi Xian was about to ask when the mysterious woman's voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Let me think about it." Think about what? Yi Xian asked instinctively. Think about whether I should destroy your world with a single strike. Yi Xian, the Left Academy emissary, frowned impatiently when he saw that the mysterious woman still had not appeared. He was about to speak when an old man suddenly appeared. The old man wore a loose robe, and his hair and beard were all white. A trace of seriousness appeared in the Left Academy emissary's eyes when he saw the old man. World Protector. In the firmament world, each of the 3 prefectures was protected by a group of mysterious people. These mysterious people were the World Protectors. This was an extremely mysterious power. Let alone Kuraki Academy, even some of the superpowers of the Central Divine Prefecture didn't dare to offend them. Their duty was to protect the states. The old man glanced coldly at the Left Academy emissary. So many people have come here. Do you want to completely destroy Azure Prefecture? The Left Academy emissary smiled slightly. How could that be? It's just killing a Sword Immortal. It's not to that extent. The old man said indifferently, "No matter who you want to kill, coming here with your strength is already against the rules." The minister of the left pondered for a moment. After a moment, he flicked his finger and a storage ring flew in front of the old man. "Please make an exception." The old man glanced at the storage ring. There were 1,000 purple crystals the size of fists inside. Violet Origin Crystal. This was an extremely precious item. A single purple Genesis crystal was equivalent to 100,000 top-grade spirit stones. Most importantly, it was relatively difficult to obtain. Hence, under normal circumstances, 100,000 top-grade spirit stones would not even be enough to exchange for a single purple Genesis crystal. Top-grade spirit stones and jade-grade spirit stones were useful for martial artists under the 10,000 Dharma boundary, but they were not very useful for experts in the 10,000 Dharma boundary and above. The purple origin crystal could satisfy experts of the Dharma controlling realm and above. 1,000 purple Genesis crystals could be said to be a very large sum. After a moment of silence, the old man glanced at the left dean. "Don't make too much noise." With that, he put away the storage ring, turned around, and disappeared into the horizon. After the realm protector left, the left dean's gaze once again fell on Yi Xian. "Are you sure she won't come out?" Yi Xian said seriously, "My master is already on his way. You can wait for a moment." The left dean frowned slightly. "On his way? From where?" Yi Xian pointed to the sky. "From above." The left dean turned and exchanged a glance with the skinny old man behind him. The skinny old man said in a low voice, "Left dean, are you sure that person is just a Sword Immortal without any background?" The left dean nodded. "Elder Su, don't worry. Before coming here, Kuraki Academy had already asked the Heaven Secrets sect to investigate this person. The Heaven Secrets sect has already investigated this person. There is no record of this person in any of the major transcendental forces. Even some of the super forces in other realms have no records of this person. Therefore, the Heaven Secrets sect has concluded that this person is an itinerant sword immortal with no background. Elder Su asked in a low voice, "Did you investigate her background?" The left dean shook his head. "Not yet. However, Kuraki Academy has investigated. There is no such person in any of the transcendental forces. For a sword immortal to be so low-key, she must be an itinerant cultivator. She is alone and has no background." Elder Su nodded. "That's for the best. Of course, even if she has some background, as long as it is not one of the top transcendental forces, we have nothing to fear." The left dean smiled. "Don't worry. She is just a sword immortal. There is nothing to worry about." With that, he turned to look at the nearby Yi Xian. "If she does not arrive in 15 minutes, I will skin you alive and hang your corpse in front of Kuraki Academy's main gate. Not only you, but everyone around you will also die. I want the world to know what happens to those who oppose Kuraki Academy." Yi Xian ignored the left dean. He only wanted to know why this sword immortal sister had not come out yet. At that moment, the mysterious woman's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "By some time." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Senior, are you still considering whether or not to destroy the world?" The mysterious woman said calmly, "Do you think I can't do it?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Of course you can. With your strength, you can destroy the entire Azure world in the blink of an eye, much less this Qingzhou. However, Kuraki Academy is too arrogant. They dare to look down on you. This is intolerable." The mysterious woman said calmly, "Don't you know that experts only appear at the critical moment? The atmosphere is not good enough. If I appear now, it will be too embarrassing. Just wait. When the atmosphere is good enough, I will come out." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded. The atmosphere is not good enough? Appearance depends on the atmosphere? Is she serious? At that moment, the left dean suddenly said, "Yi Xian, 15 minutes are up. Since your master is not coming out, I will start with you." With that, he was about to make his move. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." The left dean gazed at Yi Xian, didn't say anything, and waited silently for Yi Xian to continue. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he walked over to the left dean and said, "I know that I have no chance of survival this time, so I have a small request before I die. I hope you can fulfill it. I've heard that the left dean of the Central Divine Prefecture is a peerless expert. Today, I, Yi Xian, would like to seek guidance from you." Seek guidance. Everyone here was stunned. Seek guidance from the left dean? Has Yi Xian gone mad? Not to mention that Yi Xian was only at the Nether Passage realm, even if he was at the Dharma realm, it would still be impossible for him to fight the left dean. Because the left dean's cultivation had clearly surpassed the Dharma control realm. After all, the main institute had once sent a Dharma control realm expert here. Unfortunately, that mysterious woman had killed him with a single swing of her sword. So, it was absolutely impossible for the Dharma control realm expert that Kuraki Academy's main institute had sent again. Yet now, Yi Xian had challenged the left dean who he didn't know his limits. Has he gone mad? The left dean glanced at Yi Xian and said, "He wants to challenge me? Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "Yes." The left dean nodded slightly and said, "You, Yi Xian, are quite a figure amongst the younger generation. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, his aura suddenly dropped to the Dharma control realm in an instant. However, it didn't stop there and continued to drop. In next to no time, the Left Dean's aura dropped to the Dharma control realm under the gazes of countless people. At this moment, he couldn't go any lower. The Left Dean gazed at Yi Xian and said, "The Dharma realm is my limit. Make your move." Yi Xian nodded, and then he charged at the Left Dean with his sword in hand. As he charged, the spirit grace sword in his hand trembled violently, and the aura of his sword skyrocketed madly. Borrowing the aura. Not only did he possess his own sword aura, but he could also borrow the aura of the earth, the surrounding wind, and any other aura that he could borrow. In addition to that, with his own battle intent and sword intent, the aura of his sword could be said to have completely exceeded the scope of the divine combination realm. When he used the life and death sword, the aura of his sword once again reached a new height. Strictly speaking, the life and death sword was not just a sword technique, but more of a belief in the sword Tao. The moment the sword was unleashed, countless people in the field turned to look. Even the Left Dean's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise and shock. This was because Yi Xian's sword had already reached the scope of the Dharma realm. And this sword could be said to be Yi Xian's strongest sword. He had really used all his strength in this sword. Facing an expert of the Left Dean's level, he knew very well that he only had one chance to unleash his sword. Therefore, he had to give it his all. The sword stopped a dozen or so inches away from the left courtyard envoy's face because a palm had blocked the sword. The Left Dean's palm blocked Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian's spirit elegant sword could not move an inch further. At this moment, Yi Xian grasped the hilt of the sword with both hands and suddenly spun it. Bang! The Left Dean retreated a dozen steps, but only a dozen steps. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack again, the Left Dean's palm suddenly shook forward. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. 100 feet away, a mountain wall shook violently and a black hole appeared in the mountain wall. This hole was more than a dozen feet deep, and at the bottom of the hole was Yi Xian. The Left Dean looked down at his palm. His palm had split open and blood was flowing out. After a slight groan, the Left Dean raised his head to look at Yi Xian who had already come out. He narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. "You really have to die." In the distance, Yi Xian sat paralyzed on the ground. The spirit elegant sword in his hand was broken, and blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. This time, not only was he seriously injured, but his sword was also destroyed. The destruction of his sword meant that he had no dantian. At this moment, he was even weaker than an ordinary martial artist. It was the first time in history that he had suffered such a serious injury. At this moment, he thought of many people. His sister, Xiaofan, Mo Yunqi, Bai Zai, Ling Han, Yi Li, Jiang Jiu. In the distance, the skinny old man behind the Left Dean suddenly said, "Kill him, then go find his master." The Left Dean nodded and was about to attack when a woman in a plain dress suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The woman in the plain dress had her hands behind her back. She looked down at Yi Xian, who sat paralyzed on the ground. "Do you blame me?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't." The woman in the plain dress was about to speak, but at this moment, the Left Dean behind her suddenly said, "I thought you were going to be a coward and not come out." At this moment, the woman in the plain dress plucked out a strand of her hair. 10 feet away, the Left Dean's voice stopped abruptly because a strand of hair had already pierced through the space between his eyebrows. The woman in the plain dress turned to look at the Left Dean. "Did I allow you to speak?" Everyone. P.S. Last night, I dreamed that I earned tens of millions a year and went to Thailand and Singapore every day. Then, I updated every 3 days and lived a happy life. Chapter 201. The surroundings were deathly silent. The left courtyard emissary's eyes widened in disbelief. He was not dead, but his life force was disappearing at an extremely fast rate. Not only that, he could not move at all. What was pinned down was not his body, but his soul. At this moment, his life force and soul were disappearing at an extremely fast rate. At most a moment, he would no longer be in this world. Not only that, he would not even have the possibility of an afterlife. When people die, there is reincarnation and reincarnation. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that there must be a soul imprint. And this strand of hair was very likely to erase his soul imprint. Under normal circumstances, the soul imprint was protected by the reincarnation of heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, a person's death was like an extinguished lamp, but the soul imprint could not be erased. Even he, or rather, out of all the people he knew, no one had the means to erase the soul imprint. But the woman in front of him was very likely to be able to do it. She was definitely not a sword immortal, or rather, not a simple sword immortal. At this moment, the left courtyard emissary was horrified. He knew that Kuraki College had seriously underestimated the strength of this mysterious woman. Not only the left courtyard emissary, but the skinny old man and the others were also stunned. She had pinned down the left courtyard emissary with a strand of hair. What kind of method was this? The skinny old man and the others stared at the mysterious woman as if they were facing a great enemy. They were extremely vigilant. The mysterious woman ignored the skinny old man and the others. Instead, she turned to look at Yi Xian. How do you feel? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. How do I feel? At this moment, he felt that he was completely crippled. The destruction of his sword meant that his dantian had been destroyed. He was now really an ordinary person, not even a warrior. Yi Xian looked up at the mysterious woman. He wanted to see what she looked like, but unfortunately, he could not see her at all. The mysterious woman was standing right in front of him, but he could not see her. The mysterious woman said indifferently, "Do you know why I asked you to come and get the sword?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "The sword is strong because the person is strong." The mysterious woman nodded slightly. "It's not bad that you can think of this. However, there is another reason why I asked you to come and get the sword. As for what it is, think about it yourself." Yi Xian bitterly smiled. "Senior, I'm already crippled." "Cripple?" The mysterious woman sneered. "What do you mean by trash? Without the dantian sword, are you no longer a swordsman?" After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked, "I can still be saved?" The mysterious woman said coldly, "No, you're hopeless. Just wait for death." Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman did not speak to Yi Xian again. Instead, she turned around and walked towards the skinny old man and the others. Behind her, Yi Xian lowered his head slightly, deep in thought. At this moment, there was only one sentence in his mind. Without the dantian sword, was he not a swordsman anymore? Yi Xian fell into deep thought. As for the plain-dressed woman, she had already walked in front of the thin elder and company. The thin elder stared intently at the plain-dressed woman. "You are not a sword immortal." "Sword immortal?" The corners of the plain-dressed woman's mouth curled into a mocking smile. "That was over 100,000 years ago." The thin elder looked at the plain-dressed woman. His right hand tightly gripped the crutch in his hand. His expression was incomparably calm, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. However, his heart was already in turmoil. Over 100,000 years ago? Could anyone live that long? Could the legendary supreme existence live for so long? Who was this mysterious woman in front of him? In an instant, a series of question marks flashed through the thin elder's mind like a spark. Moreover, if this woman had already reached the level of a sword immortal more than 100,000 years ago, then what kind of existence was this woman now? Impossible. The thin elder's eyes narrowed slightly. A trace of malevolence flashed in his eyes. "Are you trying to scare the old man?" As his voice fell, he lightly tapped the ground with the crutch in his hand. "Borrow the sky's eye." In an instant, the sky changed color. The entire sky instantly darkened. Dark clouds covered the sky above Kuraki Academy, and a pitch-black eye appeared amidst the dark clouds. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled around the eye. At the same time, a shapeless pressure pressed down from the sky. The pressure was so strong that it seemed like the sky was collapsing. Countless people below were horrified, and they fled in all directions. The thin elder grinned fiercely in front of the plain-dressed woman. "Woman, have a look at the old man's ability." As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed the crutch in his hand up into the sky. The enormous eye in the sky suddenly looked down, and its gaze just happened to descend onto the plain-dressed woman. In the next moment, a pillar of lightning shot down from the eye, and the entire ground instantly trembled violently when it appeared in the sky. The ability of a god. Some people in the surroundings gazed at the pillar of lightning in astonishment. Such ability had far exceeded the scope of an ordinary person's ability. It was the ability of a god. Could that sword immortal resist it? Some people looked at the plain-dressed woman. The woman had her left hand behind her back while 2 fingers of her right hand held a strand of her beautiful hair, and then she slowly slid it down along her hair. When the pillar of lightning arrived over 30 m above her, she pressed her fingers together and pointed upwards. A strand of beautiful hair shot up into the sky. Under the gazes of countless people, the pillar of lightning suddenly began to be annihilated inch by inch. In practically less than half a breath's time, the pillar of lightning completely disappeared in the sky. However, the strand of beautiful hair did not stop, and it went straight into the sky. Boom! In the sky, the enormous eye suddenly exploded and was annihilated. The sky returned to normal. The surroundings were completely silent. The thin elder's face was pale, and he stared blankly at the sky as if he had lost his soul. How is this possible? How is this possible? A strand of hair had destroyed his great divine ability. At this moment, the thin elder's mind was completely blank. The 11 people behind him also had expressions of disbelief, especially the left academy emissary who was not far away and had yet to die. At this moment, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Because this was not something that a sword immortal could do. Not a sword immortal. Above a sword immortal? The left academy emissary's hands had already begun to tremble. The woman did not continue to attack. Instead, she turned around and walked before Yi Xian. She looked down at Yi Xian. "Have you thought it through?" Yi Xian raised his head to look at the woman. "Can you give me a little more time?" The woman nodded slightly. "All right." With that, she turned around. At this moment, the thin elder suddenly said, "You are not a sword immortal at all, you." At this moment, the thin elder's voice stopped abruptly because a strand of beautiful hair had pierced into his forehead. Just like the left academy emissary, the thin elder could not move at all. He could not fight back at all. The plainly dressed woman lightly tapped the skinny old man with her lily-white hand. "Did I allow you to speak?" The skinny old man looked at the woman in the plain dress in horror. At this moment, he was already extremely shocked. The woman before him was not a sword immortal at all. She might even be a supreme existence of legend. The thin elder's face was as white as a sheet when he thought of this. It's over. That was the only thought in his mind. The woman did not care about the thin elder. Instead, she looked at the 11 people not far away. When they saw this scene, they were horrified and were about to flee. At this moment, the woman's right thumb and index finger pressed together, and then she pulled them apart. A ray of sword light shot out from between her fingers. In the distance, the heads of the 11 people who had fled flew out one after another. In an instant, all 11 of them were dead. Not a single one was left. All of them were instantly killed. The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. "Have you thought it through?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman in the plain dress walked up to Yi Xian. "Tell me." Yi Xian said, a swordsman cultivates a Tao, a philosophy, a belief, not some Xian energy. Therefore, even without a dantian, I am still a swordsman. The woman looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said cautiously, am I wrong? The woman said calmly, you're not as stupid as I thought you were. Yi Xian was speechless. The lady in the plain dress waved her hand lightly, and the broken pieces of the spiritual beauty sword beside Yi Xian instantly flew into her hand. Looking at the pile of broken pieces, she wiped her hand lightly, and in an instant, the spiritual beauty sword returned to normal. She held the spirit elegant sword and patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly, this is the last time I help you. After today, you will have to face everything in the future by yourself. It's time for you to learn how to grow. With that, she pointed with her finger and the spirit elegant sword sank into Yi Xian's body. The woman turned and walked before the left courtyard emissary. He was about to speak when the strand of hair between his brows suddenly pierced through. Pust. The left courtyard emissary began to disappear. The left courtyard emissary looked at the woman in fear. However, no matter what he did, it was useless. He could only feel himself disappearing from this world bit by bit. Not only the left courtyard emissary, but the scrawny old man beside him also began to disappear bit by bit. The scrawny old man did not struggle. He stared at the woman in the plain dress, how strong are you? Can you answer my question? The woman walked towards the scrawny old man, in your eyes, who is the strongest? The scrawny old man stared at the woman in the plain dress, the supreme realm. No one in the firmament world has ever reached it. The woman in the plain dress nodded slightly, to me, they are like ants. The scrawny old man was stunned. Even when he was completely annihilated, his eyes were still lifeless. The supreme realm was like an ant. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in the air. The realm protector. The old man stared at the woman in the plain dress. Why did you come to Qingzhou, you? The woman in the plain dress pointed her finger upwards. Pust. A strand of hair pierced through the old man's brows. The old man's body stiffened in the air. In the air, the old man looked at the woman in the plain dress in shock. You dare to kill the realm protector, you. The woman in the plain dress glanced at the old man. Come, call for help. The old man did not hesitate and crushed a voice transmission talisman. Killing the realm protector. How many years had it been since anyone had dared to do this? Forget about this Qingzhou, even in the divine central continent, no one dared to do this. The woman in the plain dress ignored the old man and turned to look at her surroundings. After a moment, she shook her head, this world is annoying to look at. With that, she looked at Yi Xian, I'll teach you a sword technique that descends from the sky. With that, she pointed with her finger. In an instant, the spirit elegant sword in Yi Xian's body shot into the sky. The sword began to descend slowly. In an instant, the entire sky turned illusory. Not only that, but the ground began to crack inch by inch, and countless mountains collapsed. Chapter 202. Doomsday. When the exquisite sword slowly descended from the sky, everyone felt the aura of doomsday. If that sword was allowed to descend, then the entire Azure Prefecture might be destroyed. It wasn't just the Azure Prefecture, even the entire firmament world might be destroyed. She's going to destroy the world. At this moment, countless people were horrified. Especially the old man from the world protector in the sky. At this moment, his mind was completely blank. What sort of expert is capable of destroying a world with a single sword strike? Is she even human? Yi Xian was stupefied as well. Because he'd never imagined that the mysterious woman would actually want to destroy this world. She's going too far. Yi Xian hurriedly stood up and charged behind the mysterious woman. Senior, you must calm down. Calm down. He naturally didn't want this world to be destroyed. If this world was destroyed, then what would happen to the Jiang Kingdom of Azure Prefecture? What would happen to Little Nine, Mo Yinqi, and the others? The woman remained expressionless. Calm down. The ants of this world have come looking for trouble with me time and time again and disturbed my sleep. They truly deserve death. She just finished speaking when the exquisite sword in the sky suddenly descended by 3 m. In an instant, the entire Kuraki Academy was instantly transformed into powder. Moreover, the mountains around Kuraki Academy started to collapse layer by layer at this moment. Yi Xian was greatly shocked when he sensed this scene, and he hurriedly said, "Senior, aren't you looking for someone? If that person is in this world, then wouldn't that person be destroyed along with this world when this sword of yours collapses?" The woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she heard this. After a short moment, she glanced at the surroundings. Actually, this glance had already covered the entire Azure Prefecture. After a while, her gaze finally descended onto Yi Xian. She just looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Even though Yi Xian couldn't see the woman's appearance, he was able to sense that she was looking at him. Yi Xian felt his scalp go numb from being stared at. He didn't dare to be mischievous when facing the woman as he didn't want to suffer a beating. It was truly too painful when the woman hit him. After a while, the woman in the plain dress slowly closed her eyes. In the air, the elegant spirit sword also stopped and did not descend any further. Everyone in the surroundings shivered, and they didn't even dare breathe loudly. Just like this, after about 15 minutes, the woman suddenly pointed at Yi Xian. "I'll give you face." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed her jade-like hand at Yi Xian. The elegant spirit sword directly entered Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He sat down on the ground and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Even he found it hard to believe. "I actually saved the world." At this moment, the space in the sky suddenly trembled. Under the gazes of countless people, a crack suddenly appeared in the sky. Soon after, a middle-aged man walked out from within. The middle-aged man looked down below, and his gaze first landed on the old man in the sky who was being stared at by a strand of the mysterious woman's hair. The middle-aged man frowned when he saw the old man. Then, his gaze fell on the mysterious woman. The old man suddenly roared, "Hurry up and leave." He didn't know what realm the mysterious woman was at, but he knew that the mysterious woman before him wasn't someone that he and the middle-aged man could fight against. The middle-aged man was about to speak, but at this moment, the mysterious woman suddenly pinched a strand of hair with 2 fingers. In the next moment, a ray of sword light shot into the sky. Within the ray of sword light was a strand of hair. In the sky, the middle-aged man's expression changed abruptly. He placed his hands together and pressed them down. In an instant, the entire sky shook violently, and the space distorted into a strange vortex. However, the strand of hair directly pierced through the strange vortex, or rather, the strand of hair and the distorted space vortex didn't belong to the same space at all. Pust. Under the middle-aged man's terrified gaze, the strand of hair directly pierced through the space between his eyebrows. The entire sky instantly returned to normal. The woman suddenly appeared in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man stared at the woman in the plain dress. "We are the world protectors. We honor the Tendo and the gods. We guard the 9 continents and the 10 worlds and protect billions of living beings. If you kill the 2 of us, you will be punished by the heavens. The 9 continents and the 10 worlds will not tolerate it." Punished by the heavens? A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of the woman's mouth, and she looked at the middle-aged man as if she was looking at an ant. "Who in the world dares to order me around? If it isn't for the person I'm looking for in this world, then what Tendo? The gods? The 9 continents and the 10 worlds? The billions of living beings? I'll annihilate them all with a single strike of my sword." Arrogant. The middle-aged man stared fixedly at the woman in the plain dress, and he roared furiously like a wild beast. You lack reverence towards the Tendo and the gods. In the future, you will surely suffer. The middle-aged man's voice stopped abruptly because his head had already flown into the air. The woman in the plain dress was expressionless as she looked at the bloody head. Ignorant ant. Even if it's the Tendo and the gods that you speak of, they still have to maintain reverence towards me. Otherwise, if I want them to die, then they must die. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned her head slightly to look at the old man that was on the verge of death. Come, call for more people. Continue calling for more people. Don't call for trash like you. You're wasting my sword chi. Call the Tendo and the gods that he spoke of earlier. Let's see if they can withstand a single strike of my sword. The old man looked at the mysterious woman without saying a word, and he didn't continue calling for more people. Because if he did, he would undoubtedly be calling them to their deaths. Just like that, the old man slowly faded away, and after a short while, he completely disappeared from this world. The mysterious woman raised her head to look at the horizon. She had her hands behind her back, and her expression was cold and her eyes were indifferent. Not far behind the mysterious woman was Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was slightly cautious because he realized that this sword immortal sister didn't seem like a good person. She seemed to want to destroy a world at the slightest provocation. Her temper was truly too violent. At this moment, the mysterious woman slowly closed her eyes. After a long time, she spoke softly. 13,000 years, 21 people, but none of them were you. Now, I don't know if it's you either. However, even if the chance is 1 in 10,000, I won't give up. Senior? Yi Xian walked behind the mysterious woman, and just as he was about to speak, the mysterious woman suddenly said, Your sword intent is the good and evil sword intent. With this sword intent, one good thought can cross thousands of rivers and mountains, and receive the help of heaven, earth, and man. One evil thought can change the world, and destroy all living beings. The path of good thought is incomparably complicated and difficult to understand. Good people can do evil, and evil people can do good. No matter how good or evil is defined, it's all based on the heart. After carefully pondering the mysterious woman's words, Yi Xian bowed slightly. I understand. The mysterious woman slowly walked in front of Yi Xian. Both of them were very close, but Yi Xian still couldn't see the mysterious woman's appearance. The mysterious woman said again, After today, you'll have to face everything in the future by yourself. A swordsman's path is walked by oneself, not paved by others. Yi Xian bowed deeply, I'll remember Senior's words. The mysterious woman nodded slightly, After you recover, you'll have to find the second Tao law as soon as possible. There are 9 Tao laws in that broken tower, and 6 of them are in this firmament world. You'll have to collect these 6 Tao laws as soon as possible and reach the Dharma realm. Not only that, you'll also have to reach the Sword Emperor realm. Only then will you have the ability to protect yourself when this world faces a great disaster in the future. A great disaster in this world? Yi Xian was a little confused. The mysterious woman nodded slightly. When I looked at the starry sky earlier, there was an extremely evil aura outside this world. This aura is watching over this world, and it's constantly devouring the origin of this world. However, it's doing it very secretly, so the people of this world haven't discovered it. According to my speculation, it'll be able to break through with the help of this world's origin soon. When that time comes, this world will face a great disaster. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. Is it very strong? The mysterious woman looked up and said calmly, To the people of this world, it's undoubtedly very strong. Yi Xian asked hurriedly, What about you, Senior? Like an ant. The mysterious woman's voice was extremely calm. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Senior, then annihilate it with a single strike of your sword. The mysterious woman glanced at Yi Xian. I'm already being very merciful by not annihilating this world. Save the world? So long as it doesn't offend me, then what does the life and death of the myriad of living beings in this world have to do with me? Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman asked abruptly, do you want to save the world? Yi Xian shook his head. Save the world? Actually, he wasn't that great, and he just wanted to protect the people by his side. As for saving the world, he'd never thought about it. The mysterious woman walked over to Yi Xian. Do things according to your ability. It's very important to know yourself clearly. If you're unable to find the second Tao law within a year, then you'll become a passerby in this pagoda. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished directly. She's returned to the pagoda. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. Where should I go to find the second Tao law? He had no clue at all. And that god on the second floor, he had no idea where that god had gone to wander off to. It was fine to wander around, but he had to bring the Tao law back. Tao law. At the thought of this, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed drastically. The next moment, he let out a shrill cry and fell straight to the ground, curling up into a ball in pain. Backlash. It's coming. It's coming again. This time, without the suppression of the Tao law, he suffered all the backlash alone. That feeling was truly excruciating. He, Yi Xian, was not afraid of death, but he was truly afraid of this backlash. At that moment, Tuoba Little Demon walked over and looked at Yi Xian on the ground. Tuoba Little Demon frowned, and there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Swordsman, are you all right? Yi Xian did not answer. At that moment, he was already unable to answer, and his consciousness was somewhat fuzzy. Tuoba Little Demon took out her hammer, and she was somewhat hesitant. Swordsman, why don't I knock you out? It won't hurt if I knock you out. But, I'm afraid I'll beat you to death. Yi Xian, while Tuoba Little Demon was still hesitating, a woman suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. The person who had come was Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian on the ground, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Her smile was somewhat strange. Tuoba Little Demon looked at Lian Wanli. What's the matter? Lian Wanli pointed at Yi Xian on the ground. I can save him. Tuoba Little Demon blinked, and she was somewhat delighted. Really? Lian Wanli nodded and said very seriously, really? Just like that, Tuoba Little Demon and Lian Wanli each dragged one of Yi Xian's legs as they walked into the distance. As for Yi Xian, because he had been sent flying by the left academy custodian, his clothes were already torn, especially between his legs. There was nothing there, and something was exposed to the air without reservation. Along the way, Tuoba Little Demon pointed at Yi Xian's crotch and asked curiously, what's that? Why don't I have it? Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian's crotch with a look of disdain. That's the root of evil. Without it, a man can't do evil to us women. Tuoba Little Demon thought for a moment, and then said, this swordsman is a good person, and he's a friend of mine. How about this, we help him get rid of this evil? Lian Wanli nodded, all right. Tuoba Little Demon turned to look at the half-conscious Yi Xian. Swordsman, bear with it. With that, she held the hammer and smashed it down on Yi Xian's crotch. Bam! Something seemed to shatter. P.S. Recently, some people have come to scold me, saying that my writing is rubbish and that my writing is not good. And I've reflected on it, and I feel that what they said is not unreasonable. But it's all right, I'm still young, I'm only 18 years old, and I still have a lot of room for improvement. What do you guys think? Chapter 203. In his daze, Yi Xian felt a sharp pain coming from his lower body as if something had broken. However, he couldn't care less because his consciousness was getting more and more blurry. Just like that, little Tuoba and Lian Wanli each dragged one of his legs as they walked towards the distance. On the way. Little Tuoba was obviously someone who couldn't stay still. She turned around and glanced at a certain part of Yi Xian. Big Sister Lien, do you think he will thank us if I help him get rid of the source of his evil? Lien Wanli blinked and seemed rather mischievous. Maybe not. Why? Little Tuoba was puzzled. I'm helping him. Lien Wanli thought for a moment and said, Little demon, although that thing is the source of a man's evil, it is also the source of his happiness. When you get rid of his evil, you also get rid of his future happiness. So, he might not thank you. Little Tuoba puckered her lips. What source of happiness? Aren't I very happy without that ugly thing? Lien Wanli thought for a moment and seemed to be deep in thought. Actually, what you said does make sense. Little Tuoba was extremely happy to be acknowledged. Big Sister Lien, why don't we get rid of the source of all the evil of all the men in the world? Lien Wanli thought for a moment and said seriously, that's a good idea, but it's rather difficult to implement. We have to think about it at length. Little Tuoba nodded. She seemed to have thought of something and her expression suddenly became slightly solemn. Big Sister Lien, did you see that big sister in a plain dress just now? Lien Wanli nodded and her expression gradually became solemn. Little Tuoba's eyes were filled with a trace of admiration and respect. That big sister is so powerful. My father might not be able to defeat her, and my uncle might not be able to defeat her either. Perhaps I can give it a try. Lien Wanli was slightly dumbfounded. At this moment, Little Tuoba said again, my father said that it doesn't matter if you can't defeat her, but you can't embarrass yourself. So, even if I can't defeat her, I have to say that I can defeat her. In any case, I'm not fighting her, so who knows if I can defeat her or not. Lien Wanli thought for a moment and said softly, that does make sense. Just like that, the two women dragged Yi Xian and slowly disappeared into the distance. Now, Karaki Academy was in ruins. Karaki Academy had been destroyed, and more than a dozen peak powerhouses had been killed. Even the two world protectors had fallen. However, the matter was not over yet. This was because the spirit chi in the Azure province was disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Not only the Azure province, but the Azure world was also affected to a certain extent. The Azure province was the most severely affected, because the Azure province's source chi had been heavily damaged. Although the sword of the plain-dressed woman had yet to completely descend, the might of that sword was not something that the Azure province could endure. Spiritual energy was the foundation of a world, and every world had its own source. The World Protector's job was to protect the world origin, preventing it from being destroyed by the local powerhouses. Yet now, the Azure province's quintessence had suffered a heavy injury. This meant that it wouldn't be long before the Azure province would become a wasteland. To the entire Azure province, this was truly the end of the world. Or rather, it would be a disaster for the entire Azure world. In the sky above the ruins of Karaki Academy, a middle-aged man suddenly walked out of space. The middle-aged man swept his gaze over his surroundings, and after a moment, he frowned deeply. His eyes were solemn. An old man suddenly appeared not too far away from the middle-aged man. The old man glanced at the middle-aged man and said, I never thought that Supremacy Lu would personally come to Azure province. Supremacy Lu was the world protector of the Azure world. In the entire Central Divine Prefecture, his strength was at least in the top 5. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was his identity. As the World Protector, all the World Protectors of the Azure world were under his command. The World Protectors were transcendent existences in the Azure world, and the World Protector supremacy was even more transcendent. In the Central Divine Prefecture, there were only a few exceptions. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. Apart from special factions and special people, no one dared to disrespect the World Protectors. To put it simply, the World Protectors were equivalent to the government of the people. Supremacy Lu looked at the old man. Deanly, your Kuraki Academy paid a great price to invite 12 warlocks from the sorcerer world, but this is the result. What do you think? The old man was expressionless. I admit defeat. Admit defeat? Supremacy Lu said indifferently, this time, Swordsman's sword has severely damaged the Azure world's origin, especially this Azure province. The spirit chi in this province is rapidly dissipating, and it won't be long before it's completely exhausted. In the end, this all happened because of your Kuraki Academy. Don't you have any other thoughts? Li Qing chuckled. Supremacy Lu, are you trying to make my Kuraki Academy a scapegoat? Supremacy Lu was expressionless. Dean Li, it's not like you don't know the rules of the Azure world. In this tiny Azure province, Dharma realm powerhouses can attack, but they cannot destroy the spirit chi and origin of the province. But your Kuraki Academy invited 12 warlocks above the Dharma controlling realm into Azure province. This is a serious violation of the rules. Li Qing narrowed her eyes. Supremacy Lu, your realm protector didn't stop the 12 warlocks from entering the Azure province. Supremacy Lu sneered, my realm protector didn't stop them. Does this mean that your Kuraki Academy can violate the rules at will? Li Qing's eyes gradually turned cold. Supremacy Lu, you seem to have forgotten one thing. The 12 warlocks and the left court emissary of Kuraki Academy died. The one who destroyed the spiritual energy origin of this world is that woman swordsman. That woman is the culprit. Supremacy Lu glanced at Li Qing. Deanly, you don't need to worry about that woman. The Realm Protector Alliance will deal with her. Your Kuraki Academy violated the rules and should be punished. Deanly, you have 3 days to pay 20 billion gold coins and 10,000 purple source crystals to the Realm Protector Alliance. If you fail to pay within the time limit, you will bear the consequences. With that, without waiting for Li Qing to answer, he turned around and disappeared into the boundless horizon. In his place, Li Qing clenched his fists, his expression extremely unsightly, and his eyes filled with frigid killing intent and anger. The Realm Protector Alliance clearly wants to rob Kuraki Academy when it is at its weakest. 20 billion gold coins and 10,000 purple source crystals. This wealth is enough to greatly damage Kuraki Academy's vitality. It is truly a great blow to its vitality. It may take decades for Kuraki Academy to recover its vitality. Because the competition in the Central Divine region is very cruel. If Kuraki Academy suffers a heavy blow, it will no longer be able to compete with others for resources. Without resources, Kuraki Academy will either perish or withdraw from the Central Divine region. He is naturally unwilling to withdraw from the Central Divine region. Kuraki Academy was able to gain a foothold in the Central Divine region thanks to the unremitting efforts of countless people. If it withdraws from the Central Divine region, he will be a sinner of Kuraki Academy. Moreover, the hostile forces of Kuraki Academy will not let go of this opportunity to suppress Kuraki Academy. Not only those hostile forces, but some other forces may also come to add insult to injury and even join forces to divide up Kuraki Academy. Kuraki Academy's current situation is equivalent to a hopeless situation. Just then, a black-robed old man suddenly appeared not far from Li Qing. This person is the black-robed old man who followed in Lanxiu back then. However, this person is not from the Yin family. When she saw the old man in black, Li Qing's expression instantly turned icy cold. It was the old man in black who had introduced the 12 warlocks to Kuraki College. It was also the person in front of her who had solemnly vowed that the 12 of them could kill a sword immortal. But the fact is that the 12 warlocks in Kuraki Academy's left court emissary have all been killed. Kuraki Academy has paid a great price to invite the 12 warlocks. Coupled with the extortion from the Realm Protector Alliance, Kuraki Academy has been forced into a desperate situation. The black-robed old man glanced down and said indifferently, "It seems that we have failed again." Li Qing sneered, "Didn't your excellency say that the 12 warlocks can definitely kill a sword immortal?" The black-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly, a trace of darkness in them. It is the old man's estimation that was wrong. That woman can kill a sword immortal? This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. To kill 12 warlocks, she should be at least a pinnacle great sword immortal. Pinnacle great sword immortal. Without saying anything, Li Qing turned and left. For Kuraki Academy, whether it is a sword immortal or a great sword immortal, it is meaningless, because Kuraki Academy can't win. At this time, the black-robed old man suddenly appeared in front of Li Qing. "Dean Li, Kuraki Academy is in a worrying situation now, what are your plans?" Li Qing's expression was cold. "What plans? What can my Kuraki Academy do now?" The black-robed old man said, "Dean Li, don't be angry, the old man has no malice. Kuraki Academy is in a worrying situation now. According to the old man, Kuraki Academy has many enemies, and I'm afraid that there are already many forces eyeing Kuraki Academy. If Dean Li has no other plans for the time being, the old man can point out a path for Dean Li." Li Qing looked straight at the black-robed old man and didn't speak. The black-robed old man said sternly, "Dean Li, to tell you the truth, the old man is an elder of the Situ family from the upper realm." "The upper realm?" Li Qing frowned. "You are from the upper realm?" The black-robed old man nodded. Li Qing was silent. The so-called upper realm was actually also the Azure world. The Azure world was very big and contained many things. It was a diverse world. The so-called upper realm was a special existence. In other words, it was a world that was established independently. It belonged to the Azure world, but it was also an independent world. Opening up a world independently was something only a true transcendent force could do. And this upper realm was not created by a single person or force, but by many forces working together to create it. In this independent upper realm, there were some transcendent forces, and the Situ family was one of them. The black-robed old man said again, "Dean Li, why don't Kuraki Academy attach to my Situ family? With my Situ family, no one in the lower realm would dare bully your Kuraki Academy." Lower realm. The Azure world was actually a world, but to the people of the upper world, the worlds of the people outside were all lower worlds. Although it was a little high and mighty, the forces in the upper world were indeed stronger than the forces in the lower world. Li Qing was silent for a moment. "This matter is very important, the old man must discuss it with the elders of the academy." The black-robed old man smiled, "I understand." As if thinking of something, Li Qing suddenly looked at the black-robed old man. "Your Situ family also seems to want that Yi Xian dead. Why?" The black-robed old man sneered, "Brother Li may not know, but in the upper realm, many forces want to form a marriage alliance with the Yin family. My Situ family is the same. Moreover, the Yin family's patriarch also wants to form a marriage alliance with my Situ family. That Yi Xian doesn't know what's good for him and actually dares to approach Miss Humph, let alone the fact that he has a great sword immortal backing him. Even if he has a person above sword immortal, our Situ clan will definitely not spare him." Li Qing glanced at the black-robed old man. "You still want to target him?" The black-robed old man nodded. "Of course, the higher-ups have already ordered that this person must die. Missen can only be my Situ family's daughter-in-law." Li Qing nodded slightly. "I wish the Situ family good luck." With that, he turned and left. At the end of the distant horizon, Li Qing suddenly stopped, his expression fierce. "Fool! Rather than relying on your Situ family, I might as well rely on the Yin family." Speaking of this, he was slightly stunned, and after a moment, he said softly, "Yi Xian and that Missen. Rely on the Yin family, so be it." With that, he directly disappeared on the spot. In the sky above Kuraki Academy, after Li Qing left, the black-robed old man looked down coldly. Great sword immortal? Woman, when you see my Situ family, you will realize how insignificant you are. Below, Great Cloud Empire's imperial palace. Yi Xian suddenly woke up, and the next moment, a heart-wrenching scream sounded from the depths of the imperial palace. My eggs. Where are my eggs? End of this chapter. Chapter 204. On the bed, Yi Xian lay quietly with a lifeless look on his face. Not far away, little Tuoba held her head and drew circles with her index fingers. After a long silence, little Tuoba slowly walked to the side of the bed and kicked it lightly. She whispered, "It's just 2 eggs. Why are you so angry? I'll compensate you." Yi Xian was so angry that he almost vomited blood. It's just 2 eggs? Oh my God. Are these normal eggs? Are these normal eggs? Little Tuoba pursed her lips. It's just 2 human eggs. I'll compensate you with 2 tiger eggs. Yi Xian was speechless. In the end, Yi Xian did not argue with little Tuoba anymore because he realized that this girl did not know the crux of the matter at all. To her, it was just 2 broken eggs. That was all. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly walked in. She was wearing a light muslin dress. The dress was very long and dragged on the ground. At the back of the dress, there was a black phoenix. The phoenix raised its wings, wanting to soar into the sky. Her beautiful hair was spread out behind her head, and the end of her beautiful hair was gently tied up by a purple ribbon. As she walked, that small tuft of hair gently fluttered in the wind, looking very elegant. Lian Wanli walked to the side of the bed and bent down to look at Yi Xian. She smiled. Don't be angry. I have the best imperial physician in the palace. I've asked and it's not a big deal. I'll ask the imperial physician to treat you later. However, I'm afraid the fee will not be cheap. It'll cost at least 2 million supreme-grade spiritual stones. 2 million supreme-grade spiritual stones. Yi Xian's expression froze. Lian Wanli blinked. The imperial physician said that it's not too late to save you now. If it's too late, I'm afraid. Save me. Yi Xian did not hesitate. I'll save you now. The world was big, but the eggs were the biggest. Lian Wanli stretched out her hand and said with a smile, pay up first. Yi Xian was speechless. In the end, Yi Xian reluctantly handed over 2 million best-grade spirit stones. He knew that he had been cheated. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Who asked him to be in someone else's hands? It's all because of that crazy girl, Tuoba. At this moment, he wished for nothing more than to rush up and give this crazy little girl a beating. However, when he thought of this crazy little girl's strength and his current condition, he forcefully endured it. After receiving the 2 million top-grade spirit stones from Yi Xian, Lian Wanli stretched out her lily-white hand again. I need another 1 million top-grade spirit stones. Yi Xian instantly went berserk. You still need 1 million? Woman, are you a bandit? Even if you're a bandit, can't you have some professional ethics? Lian Wanli patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. Don't get excited. I never take advantage of others when they are in a precarious situation. The previous 2 million were used to buy the medicine you needed. Now, this 1 million is for my imperial physician. My imperial physician is the best medical expert in the Qingzhou region. Every time he performs a treatment, it will cost at least 1 million top-grade spirit stones. Of course. At this point, she paused and then said, if you're not willing, we won't force you. I will return you 1,500,000 top-grade spirit stones. Yi Xian was shocked. Why 1,500,000? Isn't it 2 million? Lian Wanli said seriously, penalty fee. Do you understand? Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Wanli sat aside and took a bite of a fruit. Then she said, "Don't be angry. The imperial physician said that anger is not good for you, especially for your lower body. If you're not careful, you might be impotent for the rest of your life." Impotent? Not far away, Tuoba asked curiously, "Sister Lian, impotent? This chapter is not over. Please continue. What does that mean?" Lian Wanli thought for a while and then said, "It should mean that it's not hard." Tuoba blinked. "Will that part of him be hard?" Lian Wanli nodded. "Under normal circumstances, it will be. But now, it's been broken by you. I don't think it will be hard anymore." "Oh," Tuoba looked at Yi Xian's lower body curiously. "So it could be hard there." On the bed, Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. These two women were seriously discussing whether he was hard or not in front of him. What was wrong with this world? Lian Wanli suddenly leaned in front of Yi Xian and said with a smile, "State Scholar Yi, do you want treatment or not? If not, I'm leaving." "No treatment." The one who spoke was not Yi Xian but Tuoba. She glanced at Yi Xian's lower body and snorted coldly. "Swordsman, that thing is quite ugly. Don't take it." Yi Xian was speechless. 15 minutes later, Yi Xian finally chose to compromise. This was related to his future sexual happiness, so he had to compromise. Lian Wanli beamed from ear to ear when he had received another 1 million best-grade spirit stones from Yi Xian. "Someone, summon my royal physician." Soon, a woman walked into the hall. The woman was wearing a white palace dress with a purple belt around her waist. Her waist was slender and slender. There was no makeup on her exquisite face. Her fine black hair was tied with 2 white ribbons. The rest of her hair fell down and danced in the wind. There was not a trace of emotion in her eyes, only coldness, giving off a feeling of distance that kept people at a distance of 1,000 miles. The woman walked in front of Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli smiled. "Ah Leng, I'll leave this patient to you." The woman called Ah Leng nodded slightly. Then she walked in front of Yi Xian. She dragged Yi Xian to the edge of the bed and squatted between Yi Xian's legs. Yi Xian sensed that it was a woman. He hurriedly said, A woman?" Lian Wanli smiled. "My imperial physician is naturally a woman. Why, do you have a problem?" Yi Xian was about to speak. Just then, Ah Leng took out 2 silver needles and pierced them into his thighs. In an instant, he lost all feeling in his legs. Yi Xian was shocked. What are you doing?" Before he could finish, he felt a pair of hands grabbing his lower body. It was warm and slightly itchy. Ah Leng raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. She was expressionless. "I'm just grabbing your legs. Why are you moving around? Furthermore, your essence energy is out. You're no longer a virgin. What are you being shy about?" Yi Xian, little demon Tuoba walked to Ah Leng's side. He asked curiously. "Essence energy is out. You're no longer a virgin. What does that mean?" Yi Xian, Ah Leng looked at little demon Tuoba. "You don't know?" Little demon Tuoba nodded. "I don't know. My father said that if any man dares to take off his clothes in front of me, I will beat him to death." Ah Leng pointed at Yi Xian on the bed. "Why didn't you beat him to death?" Little demon Tuoba blinked his eyes. He took off his pants. Not his clothes. Yi Xian was completely speechless. Lian Wanli was also dumbstruck. This king has truly widened his horizons today. Ah Leng looked at little demon Tuoba for a long time. Finally, she asked seriously. "Do you know the difference between a man and a woman?" Little demon Tuoba immediately replied. Of course I do. What's the difference? Ah Leng asked again. The difference? This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Where? Little Demon Tuoba blinked his eyes. He stuttered. This. I definitely know what the difference is. Even if I don't say it, you know it, right? Ah Leng shook her head. She grabbed onto one of them. Do you know what this is called? Yi Xian, Little Demon Tuoba looked at the thing in Ah Leng's hand. He then looked at Lien Wanli. Lien Wanli had a face of confidence. This king knows the stars, sun and moon. I know the geography of the mountains and rivers. How can I not know this? According to the ancient books, this thing is called root. It can be hard or soft. It can be big or small. What's its use? Ah Leng suddenly asked. Lien Wanli blinked his eyes. Use? Saying that, she looked at Little Demon Tuoba. Little Demon Tuoba immediately retracted his doubtful gaze. He said with a serious face. Use? I think it should be, saying that, she suddenly looked at Ah Leng. Anyway, you know. Everyone, Ah Leng still wanted to say something. Just then, Yi Xian suddenly said. Big sister, I beg you. Can we treat him first? These three women were simply too strong. Ah Leng looked at Yi Xian coldly. Don't worry. With me here, this thing of yours won't be broken. With that, she opened a box beside her. She took out 2 eggs that were emitting a faint red glow. The 2 eggs were not big. They were about half the size of an egg. The surface of the eggs was emitting a red glow that was slightly hot. Ah Leng looked at the 2 eggs in her hands. She then looked at Yi Xian. This is the egg of a spirit dragon of the spirit demon king level. It contains extremely strong energy. But don't worry. I have already checked your body. Your body is very strong. You can take it. Yi Xian nodded. Come. Right now, he did not want to think about anything else. He just wanted to quickly return to normal. He did not want to become a eunuch. Ah Leng nodded her head. She then took out an exquisite small knife. Very quickly, she started waving it. At the side, Little Demon Tuoba and Lien Wanli curiously surrounded her. The 2 women just stared at her. As for Yi Xian, he did not feel much. He only felt that his lower body was cold. Sometimes it was warm. After a while, it was itchy. It was very strange. Half an hour later, Lien Wanli walked out of the main hall. Outside the main hall, a woman with a sword and armor came in front of her. She bowed slightly. My Majesty, all over the Qing province, the spiritual energy has dried up. Especially in my Great Cloud realm. In many places, the spiritual energy has completely disappeared. Without spiritual energy, to a martial artist, it is like a fish out of water. It is difficult for them to survive. Right now, there is already chaos everywhere. The price of top-grade spirit stones and all kinds of energy are also skyrocketing. Speaking of this, she paused slightly. She then continued, right now, the spiritual energy is quickly dissipating. At this rate, the entire Qing province will be in chaos. What should we do, My Majesty? Please make a decision as soon as possible. Lien Wanli was silent for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, she raised her head and looked at the sky. Right now, there are only 2 paths. These 2 paths must be taken at the same time. The first is to find a spirit vein to solve the urgent problem. The second is to find a cure to save the entire Qing province. Speaking of this, her expression gradually became solemn. That sword hurt the foundation of the Azure world. Not only my Qing province, but the entire Azure world will be in chaos. Once the world is in chaos, humanity will be lost. Countless ugly sides will appear one by one. Never mind, let it be chaos. This Majesty's Azure Dragon Knife has long been thirsty. Armored Woman. P.S. Seeking monthly votes. Seeking support. No monthly votes? No problem. You can leave a message to praise me. For example, praise my handsomeness. End of this chapter. Chapter 205. Inside the palace, Yi Xian laid there quietly. Leng was fiddling around below him, while little demon Tuoba was staring at him, her eyes filled with curiosity. Leng suddenly looked at little demon Tuoba, who hurriedly stood up straight with a serious expression, as if she had seen this scene countless of times, and was not surprised at all. Leng pointed at Yi Xian's lower body. This is a man's weakest spot. If you fight with someone in the future, you can focus on this spot. With one hammer strike, the enemy will definitely lose the ability to fight. Yi Xian, little demon Tuoba nodded thoughtfully, looking at her expression. It was obvious that she would definitely try it in the future. Just like that, Leng fiddled around for about another hour, before she dusted her hands and walked to the side to wash her hands. This time, she washed for a whole hour, and as she washed, she kept muttering to herself. No one knew what she was muttering. Little demon Tuoba sat beside Yi Xian's bed, curiously staring at something on Yi Xian's lower body. Yi Xian was speechless, and immediately took out a set of clothes and put them on again. Little demon Tuoba glared at Yi Xian, stingy. Yi Xian shook his head speechlessly. He already did not want to talk to little demon Tuoba anymore. This lass, she was too careless. At the side, Leng suddenly walked over. She looked coldly at Yi Xian. 2 hours later, you should be able to regain feeling in that part of your body. And there might be some side effects, be careful. Saying that, she turned and left. Side effects? Yi Xian hurriedly sat up. What side effects? Hey, don't go. Speak clearly. Leng did not turn back, and quickly disappeared out of the palace. Yi Xian's face darkened. Side effects? What side effects would there be? He was naturally worried. After all, that was his lifeline. What imperial doctor? He was a little unreliable. At this moment, little monster Tuoba suddenly sat down in front of Yi Xian and waved the storage ring in her hand with a grin. Swordsman, do you know what's inside? Yi Xian shook his head. What is it? Little demon Tuoba immediately became excited. That's a total of 3 billion gold coins. And supreme-grade spirit stones, that's a total of 26 million. 6 million. Speaking of this, she blinked her eyes, and the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. Also, 1,300 jade-grade spirit stones. Other than that. As she spoke, she secretly glanced at the surroundings and then leaned over to Yi Xian's ear. There's still a supreme-grade spiritual vein, which I've already secretly hidden in my Qiankuan bag. I don't even dare to tell anyone. Top-grade spirit vein. Yi Xian's expression became solemn when he heard this. In the Azure province, the most common things were gold or veins, and gold coins were considered as commodities in circulation in the Azure province. And the most standard was actually the spirit vein, because a place with a spirit vein meant that there was an abundance of spirit qi, and it was suitable for cultivation. Moreover, the spirit vein was hidden underground, and it could also produce spirit stones, which was an endless source of wealth. Spirit veins were divided into low-grade, high-grade, supreme-grade, jade-grade, earth-grade, and heaven-grade. Rumor had it that heaven-grade spiritual veins possessed their own consciousness and could take form, and such spiritual veins were extremely rare even in the divine central continent. In the Azure province, the most precious spiritual vein that had ever appeared was a jade-grade spiritual vein. In the entire kingdom of Jiang, one had once appeared in Two World Mountain, but it had been taken away. Spiritual veins were something that sects and powers fought for. And a spiritual vein? This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Top-grade spiritual veins could be said to be extremely precious in the Azure province. Yi Xian pondered deeply for a short moment before he said, "Little demon, this spiritual vein is very important to me. How about this? I'll take it, and you can choose whatever you want from the rest." Tuoba shook his head. "If it's important to you, then I'll give it to you. We'll share the rest equally. In any case, I have many of them at home, and I don't lack them. Moreover, I wouldn't have been able to obtain so many things if it wasn't for you." As soon as she finished speaking, she gave half of what she'd obtained from Karaki Academy to Yi Xian. By then, Yi Xian had 2 billion gold coins, 13 million top-grade spirit stones, 2 volumes of martial techniques on the heaven level, 1 volume of cultivation method on the heaven level, 8 volumes of martial techniques on the earth level, and 2 spiritual weapons on the true level. Unfortunately, the 2 spiritual weapons on the true level were not swords, but a spear and a knife. Besides that, there were 6 bright rank spirit artifacts and 50 top-grade spirit artifacts. There were also 20 sets of black flame cavalry equipment. A sudden windfall. To him, he was undoubtedly a windfall, and these things were sufficient for him to advance to the Dharma imperial realm. Tuoba was overjoyed as well. Even though she didn't lack money, these things were really expensive, and it wasn't easy for her family to take out so many things at once. Now that she'd obtained such a huge amount of wealth, she would definitely be able to use it as a divine weapon when she returned. Because the reason she'd come out was because her father often said that she was a wastrel. Now, she didn't have to ask for money from her family before she reached the Dharma imperial realm. A sense of accomplishment. To Tuoba, this feeling of accomplishment was something she enjoyed very much. After he sent Tuoba away, he started to inspect his own condition. Earlier, he'd been heavily injured by the left academy emissary, and his spirit grace sword had been broken. At that moment, he was actually equivalent to an ordinary person. However, under the circumstances where he didn't have any cultivation, he understood something. A swordsman. Without a sword, is he no longer a swordsman? This was what the mysterious lady had asked him, and he'd previously answered her. However, he knew that he only understood the surface of this sentence. This sentence wasn't simple, and there were some things contained within that he might not be able to understand at the moment. This was because the mysterious lady's power could no longer be described with words, and she, who didn't even have a sword, was still so powerful. His current understanding was that talent was the foundation. If the person was strong, the sword would be strong. Even a strand of hair could be made into a peerless sword. If the person was weak, the person wouldn't be able to subdue the best sword in the world, much less use it. No matter which path of cultivation one took, it was all about cultivating one's heart. Know one's heart, follow it, and subdue it. Of course, this was easy to say, but it was extremely difficult to actually do it. On the bed, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. At this moment, he realized that the path of swordsman Dao Yi was much more complicated and difficult than he'd imagined. What he could do now was not to think about the future path, but to take every step properly. This was the most important thing. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly walked in. She glanced at Yi Xian who was lying on the bed and smiled. "State Scholar Yi, are you feeling better?" Yi Xian sat up and lightly patted his slightly numb feet. "Miss Lian, if there's anything, just get straight to the point." Lian Wanli took light steps and arrived in front of a soft chair opposite Yi Xian. After sitting down, she folded her hands and gently placed them on her knees, very elegant. She looked at Yi Xian with a kind smile. "State Scholar Yi, how do you feel now?" Yi Xian replied. "This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page." "Miss Lian, if there's something you want to say, just say it." He finally understood that this woman in front of him was not someone who was easy to deal with. Don't be fooled by her kind and amiable appearance, she was a person who would eat people up without spitting out the bones. Lien Wanli said seriously, "State Scholar Yi, I'm afraid you have some misunderstanding towards me." "No, no." Yi Xian shook his head repeatedly. "Miss Lien helped me, how could I have any misunderstanding towards Miss Lien? If Miss Lien has anything to say, please speak frankly." Lien Wanli smiled, "All right, I won't waste any more time." State Scholar Yi had been unconscious for 2 days. During this period of time, State Scholar Yi did not understand the current situation in the Azure region. It's like this, the spiritual energy source in the Azure region has been damaged, and the spiritual energy has been exhausted everywhere. According to what I know, there are already several cities in your country that have exhausted their spiritual energy, and a few of them are even in turmoil. Yi Xian was silent. Needless to say, it was definitely because of the mysterious woman's sword. She really wanted to destroy the world with a single sword strike, it was not a joke. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Now that he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. If he hadn't stopped her at that time, there was no doubt that the Azure region would have been destroyed by her sword. This sword immortal sister was simply too hot-tempered. Lien Wanli suddenly stood up and walked in front of Yi Xian. She said seriously, "State Scholar Yi, the land of the Azure region is in turmoil. If this continues, there might be all sorts of riots. At this critical moment, we still need State Scholar Yi to stand up and save the common people of the world. This king represents the billions of lives in the Azure region to thank State Scholar Yi, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and interrupted Lien Wanli, "Save the common people of the world? Miss Lien, did I say that I wanted to save the common people of the world?" Lien Wanli blinked her eyes, "Don't you want to save the common people of the world?" Yi Xian shook his head, "Miss Lien, I am just a small swordsman at the Nether Passage stage. It is not my turn to save the common people of the world. After I recover, I will return to the state of Jiang. As for the chaos in the state of Jiang, you don't have to worry about it. We will handle it well." Lien Wanli sat back down and didn't say anything. She gently waved her hand and an apple on the table flew into her hand. After taking a bite, she said indifferently, "State Scholar Yi, I'm afraid you don't deserve the title of State Scholar." Yi Xian smiled, "I am a State Scholar of the state of Jiang, not a State Scholar of the Great Cloud Empire." Lien Wanli looked straight at Yi Xian, "The reason why the Azure region is like this is all because of State Scholar Yi. Does State Scholar Yi not have the slightest compassion?" Yi Xian smiled, "The cause of this matter seems to be Kuraki Academy and the Dark World. Why don't you pursue the matter, Miss Lien?" Lien Wanli wanted to say something, but Yi Xian waved his hand, "Miss Lien, I am not stupid. If you still want to say such nonsense, it will only make me look down on you." Lien Wanli stood up and walked to Yi Xian, "It is not just the Azure region. The entire firmament world is in chaos. I have received intelligence that many mercenaries and factions from the Divine Central Continent have come to Azure region. These people are here to plunder." At this point, she suddenly wrapped her arms around Yi Xian's shoulders and said excitedly, "Since they can come to plunder us, why can't we plunder them? If we join forces, we will directly attack the Divine Central Continent and unify the firmament world." Yi Xian was about to speak when his lower body suddenly straightened. At the same time, all the blood vessels in his body bulged. His entire body was filled with blood. In an instant, Yi Xian's mind went blank. He hugged Lien Wanli and pressed her under his body. His and Lien Wanli's clothes were almost instantly burned to ashes by the heat radiating from his body. End of this chapter. Chapter 206. Side Effects. That was the last thought in Yi Xian's mind before he woke up. In the hall, The sudden change caused Lian Wanli's mind to go blank for a moment. When she regained her senses, she felt as though something had entered her lower body. It was very rough, very barbaric, in the blink of an eye. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body flew out, and with this flight, he flew out a few hundred feet away from the hall. When he landed on the ground beneath him instantly cracked, and along with it, Yi Xian's body also cracked. At that moment, his entire body had completely cracked, like a spiderweb. Fresh blood flowed out from the cracks, and in an instant, he became a blood man. At the entrance of the hall, Lian Wanli walked out. The current Lian Wanli was dressed in a dark red robe, her long hair fluttering in the wind, her expression cold, holding a green dragon blade in her hand. The blade was very long, 9 feet 9, and weighed at least 1,000 pounds. The blade had a green dragon swallowing the moon. Lian Wanli held the green dragon blade and walked towards Yi Xian, the blade dragging on the ground. Everywhere it passed, the ground started to crack. Just at that moment, little demon Tuoba suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She carried Yi Xian and ran. Lian Wanli frowned. Just as she was about to chase, Leng suddenly ran in front of her. Did that Yi Xian offend my king? Lian Wanli looked at Leng. Why did his personality change so much? Her voice was cold, with a trace of killing intent. Seeing that Lian Wanli was really angry, Leng was shocked. She lowered her head. My king, the item that Yi Xian exchanged for is a spiritual flood dragon's egg. Spiritual flood dragons are naturally lascivious, and within the egg, there is the strongest aphrodisiac in the world. If any female comes near, this item will automatically enter his blood vessels. At that time, he might. Lian Wanli's frown deepened. Why did you exchange for such an evil item? Leng looked at Lian Wanli, and said softly, my king, you said to exchange for something that has side effects, and not let him have it too easy. Towards the end, her voice became softer and softer, like a mosquito. But Lian Wanli still heard it clearly. Hearing Leng's words, Lian Wanli did not say anything and left with her blade. Little demon Tuoba immediately heaved a sigh of relief. This was the first time she saw Lian Wanli, so that she was so angry. She did not know what Yi Xian had done. Little demon Tuoba brought Yi Xian and left the palace. Because Tuoba had orders not to stop little demon Tuoba, thus, she was able to bring Yi Xian without any obstructions. After leaving the palace, little witch Tuoba brought Yi Xian to a dilapidated old house. She put Yi Xian on the ground and took out a small purple bottle. She poured out a purple elixir from the bottle and fed it to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian, Yi, from, Yi, from. After of Yi Xian, Yi, of Yi, of. Seeing that, little demon Tuoba heaved a sigh of relief. She turned to look at the direction of the palace and exclaimed, Sister Lian is so powerful. Saying that, she looked down at Yi Xian. Swordsman, did you do something bad? Yi Xian did not reply. At that moment, he had already sobered up a little. The moment when he flew out of the hall, he was almost killed by the shock. If not for the fact that his body was strong enough, he would already be dead. At that moment, Lian Wanli truly had the intention to kill. Actually, he felt wrong too. Because at that moment, he felt his whole body congested with blood. Adding on to the fact that he was at his weakest, he could not suppress that hot feeling at all, so he did something that he could not control at that time. And as for whether he did it or not, actually he was not very clear. Seems like this chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Thinking of something, he suddenly sat up and used his sword eye to look at his lower part. After a moment, he sighed softly and lay back down. At that moment, little demon Tuoba pointed at Yi Xian's lower part. Swordsman, are you bleeding down there? You. Yi Xian quickly took out a set of clothes and put them on. This little demon, really, does not know the difference between a man and a woman at all. Little demon Tuoba glared at Yi Xian. How stingy, it won't spoil even if I take a look. Yi Xian was speechless. How did this girl grow up? So heartless. Ignoring little demon Tuoba, he began to heal his wounds. At that moment, he was shocked to discover that the wounds all over his body were almost healed. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Little demon, what elixir did you give me to eat just now?" Little demon Tuoba was slightly proud. "Purple spiritual elixir, it's very expensive. A single one costs about 2 million supreme spiritual stones, and it's not even guaranteed to be able to buy it. My father only gives me 5 every month, and now there are only 4 left, 2 million supreme spiritual stones." Yi Xian blushed with shame. It's really expensive. Although it's expensive, its effects are really too good. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Little demon, how long have you been out?" Little demon Tuoba thought for a moment, and then said, "Even if I don't tell you, you would know, right?" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines, and he almost jumped up to give this girl a slap. "If you don't know, then you don't know. What do you mean you would know even if I don't tell you? Is this how you play?" At that moment, little demon Tuoba suddenly sat on the ground and hugged his knees unhappily. "Anyway, I won't go back." "Why?" Yi Xian asked curiously. Little demon Tuoba said coldly, "My father said that I'm a wastrel. He said that I'm the #1 wastrel in my family." Yi Xian asked again, "What did you lose?" Little demon Tuoba remained expressionless. "Nothing much. I just lost a heaven-grade treasure in my family." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. "A heaven-grade treasure? Lost? Lost it?" Little demon Tuoba grunted coldly, "I didn't want it to. I just wanted to take it out to play, but it ran away on its own. It ran away on its own, and I didn't ask it to run away. My father didn't blame it, but he actually blamed me? Is there any justice left in this world? If he wasn't my father, I would have killed him a long time ago." Killed him a long time ago. Yi Xian was speechless. Little demon Tuoba was clearly still a little upset. She sat next to Yi Xian and said angrily, "Swordsman, you're the most honest one. Tell me, can you blame me for this? I didn't ask the heaven-grade treasure to run away. It really ran away on its own. I was also very helpless." Yi Xian thought for a while and said, "I understand. You can't be blamed for this. It's mainly the heaven-grade treasure's fault. Why did it run away? If it didn't run away, then all problems would be solved, right?" Little demon Tuoba glanced at Yi Xian and said seriously, "If my father had half your intelligence, I wouldn't have to run away from home." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He decided to persuade her. "Little demon, you've been away from home for so long. Your father must be worried. What do you think?" Little demon Tuoba grunted, "If he doesn't come looking for me, I definitely won't go back." "Why?" Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Little demon Tuoba said indifferently, "If I go back like this, wouldn't I lose face? If he doesn't come looking for me, I definitely won't go back." Yi Xian was speechless. Little demon Tuoba waved her hand. "Don't talk about my father. This is a sad topic." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "Little Yi, are your injuries almost healed?" Yi Xian checked his body. At this moment, his body was almost healed. If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Done. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, "Little demon, why don't you follow me to Jiang country for the time being? I've established Blue Waves Academy there. I'm the dean." "Dean?" Little demon Tuoba's eyes lit up. "You're the dean?" Yi Xian nodded. "If an outstanding person like you goes to my Blue Waves Academy, you'll at least be a vice dean. What do you think?" Little demon Tuoba blinked her eyes. "Why only a vice dean?" Yi Xian sternly said, "As a dean, you have to deal with a lot of things every day. It's very tiring. But as a vice dean, you don't have to deal with anything. It's very relaxing. Little Demon Tuoba thought for a while. In the end, she said reluctantly, Vice Dean then. In any case, I'm also a dean. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry. Blue Waves Academy is very fun. Let's go. After speaking, he left the old residence with Little Demon Tuoba and went to Drunken Immortal Inn. After the Battle of Kuraki Academy, the entire Qingzhou was in an uproar. However, because of the sudden depletion of spiritual qi, there weren't many people paying attention to the matter of Kuraki Academy and Yi Xian. Now, the entire Qingzhou was in a state of panic. Martial artists could increase their lifespan through cultivation. However, if there was no spiritual qi, it meant that they couldn't cultivate. And if they couldn't cultivate, it meant that their lifespan couldn't increase. If there was no spiritual qi, they would really die. Currently, the price of spirit stones in Qingzhou had skyrocketed. 3,000 gold coins couldn't even buy a single top-grade spirit stone. Gold coins were depreciating, but top-grade spirit stones were increasing in value. It could be said that the current currency in Qingzhou was no longer gold coins, but spirit stones. With the arrival of chaos, many people lost their humanity. As a result, there were already a lot of robberies, massacres, and other inhumane things happening all over Qingzhou. And now, Yi Xian wanted to rush back to Jiang country as soon as possible. Yi Xian brought Little Demon Tuoba to Drunken Immortal Inn. The person who received them was a steward. The steward bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, what do you need? Yi Xian said, give me a cloud ship. I want to rush back to Jiang country immediately. The steward nodded. Young Master Yi, please wait a moment. I will arrange it now. It will take at most a quarter of an hour. After speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian faced Little Demon Tuoba. Little Demon Tuoba sat on a chair and looked around thoughtfully. What's on your mind? Yi Xian asked. Little Demon Tuoba ran in front of Yi Xian and whispered, This Drunken Immortal Inn is very rich. Do you want to rob it? Yi Xian, at that moment, Little Demon Tuoba and Yi Xian's expressions changed drastically. In the next moment, the two of them vanished from where they were. When they reappeared, they were outside Drunken Immortal Inn. Behind them, Drunken Immortal Inn collapsed. In the sky above the ruined Drunken Immortal Inn stood a man in a black cloak. The man's right hand was pinching an old man. It was the steward of Drunken Immortal Inn from before. The man looked at the steward and grinned. His smile was somewhat sinister. I rushed here from the divine central continent. You actually told me that this Drunken Immortal Inn only has 2 million top-grade spirit stones? Are you joking with me? As he spoke, he slowly exerted force. The steward's face immediately turned purple, and he found it difficult to breathe. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother, can you give me some face and let him go? The cloaked man turned to glance at Yi Xian. In the next moment, he exerted force with his right hand. Crack! The steward's neck was snapped. The cloaked man loosened his grip, and the steward fell to the ground, no longer breathing. As for the cloaked man, he looked at Yi Xian and grinned. Let him go. End of this chapter. Chapter 207. He was dead. Yi Xian stood on the spot in silence. In these chaotic times, if a person lacked strength, then they could only be trampled upon. Life and death, honor and disgrace weren't up to anyone's control. This was the bloody reality of life and death. The cloaked man who stood in front of Yi Xian sized up Yi Xian, and then a wisp of ridicule curled up on the corners of his mouth. A blind man like you doesn't even know how strong you are? Yet you're trying to be a busybody? You overestimate your ability. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward towards Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light flashed. Hiss! The sound of something tearing resounded. A breath of time later, the surroundings fell silent. Yi Xian appeared where the cloaked man had been standing just now, and the cloaked man was standing where Yi Xian had been standing. They were around 20 m away from each other. The cloaked man's entire right arm was gone, and blood sprayed incessantly from his shoulder like a fountain. His countenance was extremely pale, and his eyes were filled with a solemn expression. As for Yi Xian, he was completely unharmed. However, a sword had suddenly appeared in his hand. Yi Xian turned around and walked towards the cloaked man. The cloaked man turned around as well, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You're from the Central Divine Prefecture as well?" Yi Xian didn't answer. He walked over to around 3 m in front of the cloaked man, and he was just about to speak when a hammer smashed against the cloaked man's head. Bang! The cloaked man's head instantly exploded apart, and he perished on the spot. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he turned to Tuoba. "I haven't said anything yet." Tuoba gestured with her right hand, and the hammer flew back into her grasp. She glanced at Yi Xian. "You can say it now as well. Moreover, it's your decision now." He can't resist at all. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Tuoba suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and spoke softly, "Do you think I'm a little violent?" Yi Xian was speechless. "Aren't you a little violent?" "Very violent, all right." Tuoba spoke with slight helplessness. "My uncle said that a girl has to know how to protect herself when she's outside. If she doesn't pretend to be fierce, then she'll be easily bullied. Therefore, when I go out, I am very careful. As long as I find that the other party is dangerous to me, I will kill him with a hammer. If one hammer doesn't work, I will hit him twice until he dies." She spoke in a very serious tone. Obviously, she'd really been doing that all this time. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Although this girl looked weird, she was actually a very dangerous person. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the storage ring of the cloaked man immediately flew into his hand. Yi Xian was a little surprised when he took a look at the storage ring, because the cloaked man actually had more than 2 million best-grade spirit stones. Moreover, there was also a sword on the bright level. There were also a lot of miscellaneous items, totaling up to 10 to 20 million gold coins. He had earned a small fortune. When Yi Xian gave the items to little demon Empress Tuoba, she was so happy that she could not close her mouth. She had earned another 1,000,000 supreme-grade spirit stones. As for the bright rank sword, it belonged to Yi Xian. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared near Yi Xian and little monster Tuoba. The person who had arrived was the 6th house master of the Drunken Immortal Inn. At this moment, there was a trace of blood at the corner of the 6th floor master's mouth. Clearly, he was injured. The 6th floor master glanced at the ruins not too far away, his expression cold and gloomy. As though he had thought of something, he looked at Yi Xian. "Many thanks to young Master Yi for lending a hand." Yi Xian walked in front of the 6th floor master. "Senior, did something happen at the Drunken Immortal Inn?" The 6th floor master nodded. "Young friend, you should know that the entire firmament world source has been damaged. This is especially true for the Azure Prefecture. With the lack of spirit qi, many people have begun to act recklessly. The divine central continent is not that chaotic yet, because there are realm protectors to maintain order. Therefore, many people do not dare to act recklessly in public. But..." At this point, he shook his head and sighed. "But there is no order to speak of in the Azure Prefecture and the Kanglan Prefecture. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. Some factions, mercenaries, and itinerant cultivators of the divine central continent have already shifted their target to the Azure Prefecture and the Kanglan Prefecture. They want to make a fortune in this chaotic world. Doesn't the Azure Prefecture also have realm protectors? Little Monster Tuoba suddenly asked. The sixth floor master shook his head slightly. I have already received news that because the Divine Central Continent is short on manpower, the Realm Protector Alliance has already transferred all the Realm Protectors of the Azure Prefecture and the Kanglan Prefecture back to the Divine Central Continent. It is precisely because of this that some factions of the Divine Central Continent have set their sights on the Azure Prefecture and the Kanglan Prefecture. And my Drunken Immortal Inn is undoubtedly their main target. Little Monster Tuoba nodded. Yes, your Drunken Immortal Inn is very rich. Even I want to rob it. The sixth floor master, Yi Xian, was speechless. How could this girl speak like this? Little Monster Tuoba did not feel that there was anything wrong with her words at all. She was just speaking the truth. Thus, she asked again, your Drunken Immortal Inn is considered to be quite good in the Divine Central Continent. Why haven't you sent any powerhouses to guard it? Yi Xian faced the sixth floor master. Little Monster Tuoba's question was what he wanted to know as well. The sixth floor master smiled bitterly. Right now, our headquarters can barely take care of itself in the Divine Central Continent. How can we have the energy to manage the Azure Prefecture and the Kanglan Prefecture? I have already discussed with the seventh floor master and the fifth floor master. If necessary, we can only temporarily close the Drunken Immortal Inn in the Azure Prefecture. Close? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Won't we suffer great losses then? The sixth floor master's smile grew even more bitter. We can't help it. Presently, all sorts of sects, clans, independent cultivators, and even some geniuses on the monstrous genius rankings have come to Azure Prefecture to plunder. My Immortal Inn is powerless against them. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, Senior, how about this? Don't close the Drunken Immortal Inn of the state of Jiang. The personnel and materials of the Drunken Immortal Inn of the other kingdoms can be transported to the state of Jiang. As for the safety of the Drunken Immortal Inn, my Blue Waves Academy will protect it. The sixth floor master looked directly at Yi Xian. Young friend Yi, do you know that doing this is very likely to cause the state of Jiang to become the target of public criticism? It might even become the target of countless sects and clans. Yi Xian nodded. I know. The sixth floor master was slightly puzzled. Then what about you? Yi Xian smiled and said, the Drunken Immortal Inn has helped me more than once. Now that the Drunken Immortal Inn is in trouble, how can I stand idly by? I don't dare to guarantee the safety of the Drunken Immortal Inn, but I, Yi Xian, am willing to advance and retreat together with the Drunken Immortal Inn. As far as Yi Xian was concerned, a person shouldn't forget enmity, and even more so, he shouldn't forget kindness. He would always remember those who were bad to him, and similarly, he would always remember those who were good to him. The sixth floor master looked at Yi Xian, and there was a trace of complexity in his eyes. In fact, when the Drunken Immortal Inn supported Yi Xian, he was opposed to it. That was because Yi Xian was in a whirlpool, and if the Drunken Immortal Inn interfered, it was very likely that it would bring about a disaster. Although he was opposed to it, when everyone decided to support it, he didn't say anything. And now, the facts prove that the decision of the Drunken Immortal Inn was right. It wasn't because of Yi Xian's help this time, but rather because of Yi Xian's talent and potential. With Yi Xian's talent and potential, he would definitely be able to go very far in the future. The further Yi Xian went in the future, the more benefits the Drunken Immortal Inn would be able to go. Not to mention the future, the Drunken Immortal Inn in Qingzhou would already be able to benefit from it. Currently, the two biggest forces in Qingzhou were Great Cloud Empire and Ashy Waves Academy. Ashy Waves Academy had Yi Xian and the Ashy Waves Dao soldiers. If the headquarters of the Drunken Immortal Inn didn't send people over, the Drunken Immortal Inn would be far inferior to Ashy Waves Academy in Qingzhou. The current Ashy Waves Academy was really strong, especially the Ashy Waves Dao soldiers. They were definitely not inferior to the Dao soldiers of Drunken Immortal Inn in the Central Divine region. After discussing with Yi Xian, the sixth-floor master immediately went to inform the Drunken Immortal Inn in Qingzhou and asked them to hurry to Jiang country. As for Yi Xian, he boarded the cloud ship with little Tuoba and rushed back to Jiang country. On the deck of the cloud ship, Yi Xian and little Tuoba stood at the bow. Below the cloud ship was a wide river, and on both sides of the river were unbroken mountains. From time to time, birds could be seen flying over the mountains. Little Tuoba placed her hands on the pole of the ship and looked down at the mountains and rivers below. She was in a daze as if she was thinking about something. Yi Xian gently pulled little Tuoba's sleeve. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. What are you thinking about? Little Tuoba came back to her senses and looked at Yi Xian. I have been here for a few days, but my father hasn't come to find me. Has he gone to give birth to another one? Yi Xian, little Tuoba suddenly said angrily, definitely. I knew it. He must have gone to give birth to another one. Humph, I know he has long disliked me. He always says I am a prodigal. Isn't his home my home? Is there a problem with me squandering my own home? I am not even angry, so why should he be angry? Yi Xian shook his head. This girl's logic was too terrifying. Can't keep up. Can't keep up. Little Tuoba suddenly sighed in a low voice. My father has such an outstanding daughter like me, but he still dislikes this and that. I feel sad for him. Yi Xian, little Tuoba shook her head. Don't think about him. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Little Yi, there is also a Blue Waves Academy in the Divine Central Continent. What does our Blue Waves Academy have to do with them? Yi Xian shook his head. It doesn't matter. We are us, and they are them. Tuoba blinked. What are you planning to do by yourself? Yi Xian smiled and said, you can say that. Little Tuoba gave Yi Xian a thumbs up. You have guts. No wonder you could see how outstanding I am the moment you saw me. Facts have proven that although my friends are not as outstanding as me, they are still capable. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This girl seemed to be praising others, but she was actually praising herself in a roundabout way. Perhaps she did not even realize it herself. She was extraordinarily strong in her heart. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared in front of the cloud ship. He had a pair of huge black wings on his back, like the wings of a rock. There were 3 more cloud ships behind him. The man sized up Yi Xian and little Tuoba. Are the 2 of you from the Divine Central Continent? Yi Xian was about to speak when little Tuoba suddenly said with some excitement, Are you here to rob us? Yi Xian, the man glanced at little Tuoba with a hint of fear in his eyes. You must be joking. Danger. This was the feeling that Yi Xian and little Tuoba gave the man. Little Tuoba immediately lost interest when she saw that the man was not here to rob them. She leaned against the pole and played with the small hammer in her hand. From time to time, she would glance at the man. No one knew what she was thinking. Ever since she followed Yi Xian, she had become a little addicted to robbing. At this moment, the man suddenly said, Are the 2 of you going to Ning country? Ning country? Yi Xian frowned slightly. What do you mean? The man was slightly surprised. Don't you know? It's said that the king of Ning country, Tuoba Yen, has a connate charm body. If you have sex with him, your cultivation will be greatly enhanced. The Joyful Union sect and Joyful sect have already gone to the Ning country to capture this person and refine him into a human cauldron. At this point, the man smiled sinisterly. It's said that the king of Ning country is an outstanding beauty. She's a rare beauty. If we can, the man's voice stopped abruptly because a sword had pierced through his glabella. The man stared at Yi Xian in horror. Yi Xian's expression was cold, and his body exuded a cold killing intent. He stabbed forward with the sword in his right hand and said fiercely, "Who the F***ck dares to touch my woman?" With that, he slashed down with his sword. Chi! The man's head instantly flew off. P.S. Today's third update. Let's talk about the recent situation. I'm still in the hospital. I'm not here to act pitiful. It's just that I've been busy with family matters recently. I'm helpless about the updates. I'm really helpless because I only have time to update at night recently. When I write this, it's 12:20 a.m., I can only say that I'll work hard and try to keep updating. Everyone, I'm sorry. End of this chapter. Chapter 208. The man's head flew far away. His eyes were wide open, and it was clear that he had died with a grievance. In the air, little Tuoba waved her hand, and the man's spatial ring flew into her hand. She did not look at the spatial ring and instead looked at Yi Xian nearby. At that moment, Yi Xian held the spirit-elegant sword that was dripping with blood, and the killing intent he exuded was almost tangible. Little Tuoba walked to Yi Xian's side and asked softly, "Little Yi, what's wrong?" Yi Xian shook his head. "We're not returning to the nation of Jiang for now. We're going to the nation of Ning." With that, he turned to return to the cloud ship. At that moment, over a dozen people suddenly rushed out from the 3 cloud ships nearby. All of them were at the Divine Combination realm. These people were extremely fast, and they arrived around Yi Xian and little Tuoba in an instant, surrounding them. A young man walked out from the group of people. He held a spear in his hand and glanced at little Tuoba before looking at Yi Xian. "You killed my men?" Yi Xian turned to face the young man. "Is there a problem?" The young man narrowed his eyes. "I believe you're from the Divine Central Continent." "I, Wu Jun, know some people in the Divine Central Continent. I even know a few on the demon-level geniuses list." Yi Xian pointed his sword at the distant horizon. Scram! The young man narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed through them. "You're not going to give me any face? Since that's the case." At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed down with his sword. The young man's pupils constricted, and he thrust the spear in his hand upwards. The spear was like thunder, shaking the heavens. The sword arrived. Boom! The collision of the spear and sword was like a clap of thunder, and the echoes instantly spread to the surroundings. At the same time, a figure retreated rapidly in the air. Everywhere he passed, his body would shatter the air. This figure was none other than the young man. With this retreat, he retreated 40 to 50 feet. The moment he stopped, the spear in his hand shattered, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The young man looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. Yi Xian was just about to attack again when the young man suddenly said, "Please wait, we'll leave immediately." After he finished speaking, he turned around and fled. His speed was extremely fast, and he disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. The people around Yi Xian and little demon Tuoba also fled one after another. Yi Xian didn't chase after him because he didn't want to waste any time. His top priority now was to get to Ning country as soon as possible. Although the Ning nation was considered a powerful nation in Green Province, there was still a gap between it and the sects and aristocratic families of the Central Divine Continent. He had to get to Ning country as soon as possible. Soon, Yi Xian and Tuoba returned to the cloud ship and headed straight for Ning Nation. After Yi Xian and little monster Tuoba left, the young man, Wu Jun, and the others stopped. At this moment, all of their expressions were extremely solemn. Especially Wu Jun. If he hadn't exerted his full strength during that collision just now, then that strike would have been sufficient to take his life. A man by Wu Jun's side asked, "Big brother, who was that swordsman? How terrifying." Wu Jun shook his head. "I don't know. He's probably attained the Swordmaster realm. A Swordmaster at such a young age is definitely renowned even in the Central Divine Continent, but I've never heard of him. Could it be that he's from Pine Prefecture?" The man by Wu Jun's side shook his head. How could such a monstrous genius possibly exist in a small place like Pine Prefecture? Wu Jun spoke coldly, "Why is it impossible? Isn't Anlanxiu from Pine Prefecture?" Anlanxiu. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings turned solemn when they heard these three words. Presently, there was no one in the Central Divine Continent who didn't know this name. After a short while, Wu Jun shook his head, "No matter what, it's best to be careful. Go investigate later and get to know the monstrous geniuses of Pine Prefecture in detail. While we're in the outside world, we absolutely must find out about Dao Yi, and that's who we can touch and who we can't." All of them nodded, and it didn't take long for their group to vanish. On the boat, Yi Xian and Taba stood at the front of the boat. Yi Xian's expression was extremely gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. Taba pulled on Yi Xian's sleeve and said softly, "Little Yi Xian, don't worry. We'll definitely be able to make it in time if we rush over right now." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "I hope so." When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something, and he turned to look at Taba. "Little demon, do all the sects and clans of the Central Divine Continent act so fearlessly?" Taba shook his head. "They naturally wouldn't dare to act like that in the Central Divine Continent. Because those who can survive there aren't ordinary people. If they act so fearlessly, then they'll be dealt with sooner or later. Moreover, there are world protectors up there. Even though those fellows are insatiably greedy, they're still very deterring." When she spoke up to hear, she paused slightly and continued, "The main reason they act so fearlessly in Pine Prefecture is because they look down upon Pine Prefecture from the bottom of their hearts. They feel that Pine Prefecture and Azure Wave Prefecture are barbaric places. Moreover, the martial Dao civilization of these two prefectures really can't compare to the Central Divine Continent. Coupled with the fact that the world protectors of Pine Prefecture have headed to the Central Divine Continent, that's why they dare to act so fearlessly." Yi Xian nodded and said softly, "I understand." Taba continued, "I've heard of the Double Happiness sect and the Joyous sect. These two powers have some influence in the Central Divine Continent, but their reputations aren't good. Because they like to capture women and refine them into cultivation furnaces. Such a path of cultivation is similar to the Devil Dao. Actually, they're a branch of the Devil Dao. However, there are many experts of the Devil Dao in the Realm Guard Alliance. So long as these powers don't go too far, then they're usually fine." The Devil Dao. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "There's the Devil Dao as well?" Taba replied, "Of course. Besides the Devil Dao, there's the Demon Dao and even the Ghost Dao. In any case, it's quite complicated over there. As for the Double Happiness sect and the Joyous sect, they're not good people. We can just kill them when we see them." Yi Xian was speechless. The cloud boat sped up at Yi Xian's signal and headed straight for the kingdom of Ning. They encountered numerous cloud boats along the way. Most of the people on these boats were mercenaries. Some weren't very strong, but some were extremely strong. It was even to the extent that Yi Xian felt a trace of danger from them. Their destination was the kingdom of Ning. The kingdom of Ning was a country at any rate, so how shocking would its wealth be if it didn't have a leader? All of them were in a hurry because they were deeply afraid that they wouldn't even be able to eat the leftovers if they were late. During this time, there were some conflicts between these cloud boats. However, basically no one came to cause trouble for Little Demon Tuoba. This was because Little Demon Tuoba was standing on the bow of the boat. When she saw the cloud boats passing by, she waved her hands and shouted, "Are you guys robbing me? I have a lot of money. Saying that, she took out a large number of true-grade weapons and a pile of jade-grade spirit stones. However, what made Yi Xian dumbfounded was that no one came to cause trouble for her despite her ostentatious behavior. No one dared to. There were only two kinds of people who dared to call for people to rob them without the slightest scruple. One was an idiot with abnormal intelligence. The other was someone who was extremely strong and had absolute confidence in himself. Although little demon Tuoba seemed a little abnormal, no one dared to touch her after seeing her smash a pinnacle divine combination stage expert into minced meat with a single swing of her hammer. She was definitely pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Seeing that no one came to rob her, little demon Tuoba was a little depressed. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Why don't you take the initiative to rob them?" Little demon Tuoba rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "My father said that if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If they don't offend me, I won't be too embarrassed to hit them. However, if they take the initiative to offend me, I won't be embarrassed to kill them." Yi Xian was slightly speechless. This girl even needed a reasonable reason to rob others. However, what she said made sense. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. Although Yi Xian was also a bandit, if people didn't offend him, he wouldn't take the initiative to rob others. In other words, he and little demon Tuoba were actually the same kind of people. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly turned to little demon Tuoba. "No, little demon, you took the initiative to attack me. I didn't offend you." Little demon Tuoba blinked her eyes. "Did I?" Yi Xian nodded seriously. "Yes." Little demon Tuoba thought for a while and then said seriously, "This is a serious problem. I think we can put this problem aside for now and discuss it in the future." Yi Xian. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't chase after her, little demon Tuoba secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, she didn't want to kill Yi Xian. She only wanted to stop Yi Xian because she would get money if she stopped Yi Xian from advancing. The reason why she pretended to want Yi Xian's life was because a girl had to pretend to be fierce when she was outside. If she didn't pretend to be fierce, she would be easily bullied. This was what her father had told her. The cloud ship sped up and was getting closer to Ning country. Ning country. At this moment, many strangers suddenly came to the imperial capital of Ning country. After these people entered the city, they didn't know their place at all. They robbed, killed, raped, and committed all kinds of crimes. For these people, without any restraints, coupled with their powerful strength, they could do anything they wanted. The Ning country didn't just stand by and watch. The imperial guards of the imperial palace and the most powerful golden guards of Ning country were sent out to suppress the experts of the divine central country who had entered the city. Unfortunately, it wasn't very effective because the effect of the army was greatly reduced in the city. Moreover, these people were extremely powerful, so the imperial capital of Ning country became more and more chaotic. Some mercenaries from the divine central country even broke into the imperial palace. In the main hall of the imperial palace, Tuoba Yen sat on the dragon throne with an extremely gloomy expression. Behind her were an old woman and an old man. At this moment, a man in black entered the hall and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, some experts from the divine central country are besieging the imperial palace from all directions. The north gate has fallen, and the south gate can only hold out for an hour at most, report." Another man in black suddenly rushed in and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, the Li, Yu, and Feng families in the city have openly rebelled and participated in the siege of the imperial palace." On the dragon throne, Tuoba Yen clenched his fists, his face as gloomy as still water. No one knew what he was thinking. On the cloud ship, Yi Xian, who was standing at the bow, suddenly said, "Little demon, guard me. No one is allowed to enter my room." After saying that, he returned to his private room. After entering the private room, he immediately entered the primordial pagoda. He opened his right hand and 8 swords appeared in front of him. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian picked up a sword and stabbed it into his body. Chapter 209. Devour. Before devouring the swords, Yi Xian was actually somewhat hesitant. This was because using the 8 swords as flying swords could greatly increase his battle prowess. But on second thought, no matter how strong the 8 swords were, they wouldn't allow him to kill a Dharma realm expert. If he wanted to kill a Dharma realm expert, he had to break through to the Divine Union realm. Previously, because of Kuraki Academy in Dark World, Mo Wuji didn't dare to break through to the God Fusion realm. Because the moment he broke through to the God Fusion realm, the myriad laws realm experts of Kuraki Academy and Dark World wouldn't need to suppress their cultivation to attack him. Apart from that, his cultivation realm wasn't that stable before, so he temporarily chose not to break through to the Divine Union realm. But after the battle at Kuraki College, he could be said to have reached his limit. He had a new understanding of the Sword Tao. To him, the time had come. After devouring a sword, Yi Xian instantly felt boundless energy radiate from his body. Very soon, the spirit elegance sword in his body trembled slightly. In an instant, the energy surged towards the spirit elegance sword like a tidal wave. About 15 minutes after the spirit elegance sword devoured it, an even purer energy radiated from the spirit elegance sword and spread towards his limbs and bones. Divine Union Realm. The so-called Divine Union Realm was about the perfect fusion of the physical body and the soul. The physical body and the soul were like 5 fingers. The 5 fingers were naturally connected, but that didn't mean that they could use the 5 fingers flexibly. The soul and body were naturally connected, but it could still be improved. This was the so-called Divine Union Realm. Reaching Divine Union, the body and soul would improve, and the body would also undergo a qualitative transformation. What Yi Xian needed to do now was to improve his body and soul and transform again. About an hour later, Yi Xian devoured another sword. Just like that, within the prison pagoda, Yi Xian's aura began to grow stronger. Outside the prison pagoda, little demon Tuoba was somewhat bored. She sat on the pole and her 2 small feet floated outside the boat. Right at this moment, a cloud ship suddenly appeared behind them. That cloud ship was extremely swift, and in a short while, it had surpassed the cloud ship that she and Yi Xian were on. After being surpassed, little demon Tuoba turned around to look at that cloud ship. A man in embroidered robes was standing on that cloud ship. The man was dressed very luxuriously. He wore an embroidered robe with a faintly glowing spirit jade tied to his waist. One look and anyone could tell that he was either rich or noble. As though sensing little demon Tuoba's gaze, the man suddenly turned his head to look at little demon Tuoba. His eyes lit up when he saw little demon Tuoba. He gently pressed down with his right hand, causing the cloud ship to instantly slow down. The brocade-robed man looked at little demon Tuoba and smiled. "May I know how I should address you, young lady?" Little monster Tuoba asked calmly, "Is there anything you need?" The man in embroidered clothes smiled and said, "When I first saw you, I felt that you were like a celestial being. To be honest, I want to be friends with you. What do you think?" "Friend?" Tuoba blinked. "You want to be friends with me?" The man in embroidered clothes nodded. "If I can be friends with you, it would be my honor for 3 lifetimes. Little demon Tuoba glanced at the man in embroidered clothes and said calmly, "If you want to be friends with me, aren't you going to express it?" "Express it." The man in embroidered clothes' expression stiffened slightly. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled up slightly. A woman that could be settled with money was naturally the best. It could save him a lot of trouble. The man in embroidered clothes flicked his finger and a card flew to little demon Tuoba. "There are 500,000 gold coins in this card. Consider it my greeting gift to you, young lady. 500,000 gold coins. Little Demon Tuoba took a look at the card and shook her head with a sigh. No wonder my father said that it's hard to find a soulmate in this world. Little Yezi did not hesitate to spend hundreds of millions of gold coins to be friends with me. It seems that little Yezi is my soulmate. As she spoke, she flicked her finger and the card flew to the man in embroidered clothes. Let's go. I, Little Demon Tuoba, only make friends with people with good foresight, like little Yezi. As for you, you're too poor. I don't want to be friends with you. The man in embroidered clothes narrowed his eyes. Are you not going to give me any face? His voice was slightly cold and carried a trace of threat. Hearing this, Little Demon Tuoba turned to look at the man in embroidered clothes. Without any nonsense, she suddenly smashed out with her hammer. The man in embroidered clothes' expression changed drastically. His body trembled and he retreated dozens of feet to the left. The cloud ship that he was originally on instantly cracked and turned into powder. Seeing this scene, the man in embroidered clothes' face turned slightly pale. The moment an expert made a move, it was obvious whether or not he was an expert. He knew that he had offended someone he should not have offended. The man in embroidered clothes hurriedly bowed slightly to Little Demon Tuoba. I hope that young lady is magnanimous enough to forgive me for my previous offense. Little Demon Tuoba stretched out her small hand. Leave the things here. You can leave. The man in embroidered clothes, about 15 minutes later, Little Demon Tuoba sat on the pole and was counting a large pile of things. This is little Yezi's. This is mine. This is little Yezi's. This is mine. This is little Yezi's. And this is also for little Yezi. One day later. Ning country's imperial capital. At this moment, the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom was in chaos. Because too many profounders from the central divine prefecture had surged into the city. Ordinary soldiers were utterly helpless against these cultivators from the central divine prefecture. However, that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was that the spirit energy in Pine Prefecture had dried up, and the hearts of the people were in chaos. It was especially so for the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom. The spirit energy there was vanishing at a shocking speed every single day. In the beginning, the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom was barely able to maintain its peace with the suppression of the imperial family of the Ning kingdom, and no major trouble had arisen. However, once these cultivators from the central divine prefecture entered the imperial capital, the situation had instantly gone out of control. Because ordinary soldiers weren't able to deal with these fellows from the central divine prefecture at all. When they saw these fellows from the central divine prefecture act recklessly and cause trouble in the city, some people in the city couldn't restrain themselves any longer. So, the entire city had gradually fallen into chaos. It wasn't just the city that was in chaos, even the imperial palace of the Ning kingdom was in imminent danger. At this moment, 2 of the 4 city gates of the imperial palace had fallen into enemy hands, and it was the cultivators from the central divine prefecture who had attacked those city gates. There were mercenaries, disciples of the clans, and independent cultivators amongst them. Moreover, they'd traveled so far to Pine Prefecture for the sake of getting rich. Plunder like crazy. That was what they wanted to do. That was exactly what they wanted to do. In addition to the cultivators from the central divine prefecture, there were also cultivators from the Ning kingdom itself. Among them were independent cultivators and ordinary cultivators, but most were disciples of the aristocratic families. Within the borders of the Ning kingdom, the Ning family was undoubtedly the #1 aristocratic family. Apart from the Ning family, there were also some other ancient aristocratic families. These families didn't choose to stand with the Ning kingdom at its most critical moment, but instead chose to take advantage of the situation. In the eyes of these aristocratic families and countless others, the Ning kingdom was bound to fall. This was because the Joyful Union sect and the Joyful sect from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture were going to attack the imperial family of the Ning Kingdom. The Ning Kingdom was considered a decent force in Pine Prefecture, but compared to these forces from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture, there was still a considerable gap. Coupled with the natural disaster and the depletion of spirit energy, it could be said that the Ning Kingdom was in a hopeless situation. Under such circumstances, everyone wanted a piece of the pie. After all, it was a nation, and its domestic wealth was bound to be astonishing. In the main hall of the Ning Kingdom's imperial palace, Tuoba Yen was still sitting on the dragon throne. Behind her stood the old woman and the black-robed old man. On both sides of her stood about 30 heavily armored guards with broadswords in their hands. The Golden Guards. These 30 people were the elite Golden Guards selected from the Golden Guards. Each of them had experienced hundreds of battles, and their combat strength could be said to be the strongest in the Ning Kingdom. Tuoba Yen sat expressionlessly on the dragon throne. The old woman behind her suddenly stepped forward. "Your Majesty, let's go first." "Go?" Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "Those two sects' target is me." "Where should we go?" The old woman said solemnly, "The two of us will risk our lives to ensure that your Majesty leaves safely." "What about the people and the soldiers in the city?" Tuoba Yen chuckled. "Abandon them?" Inside the hall, the 30 elite Golden Guards knelt in unison. "We are willing to die for your Majesty." Tuoba Yen shook her head slightly. "Abandon the people in the city and the soldiers of the Ning Kingdom. We cannot do it." With that, she stood up. "Let's go. Let's go meet these people from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture." By the time she finished speaking, she had already walked out of the hall, followed closely by the 30 Golden Guards. Inside the hall, the old woman and the old man exchanged glances, sighed softly, and followed. Outside the hall, the entire imperial palace had already fallen, for the Dharma realm experts had already made their move. Inside the imperial palace, all the soldiers had retreated to the entrance of the hall. In front of these soldiers were more than 100 experts from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture, including 3 Dharma realm experts. In addition, there were more than 200 people around them, most of whom were native cultivators of the Ning Kingdom. The reason why the palace fell so quickly was because of the 10,000 Laws realm powerhouses. Under normal circumstances, Dharma realm experts could not act at will, especially when it came to the destruction of a country. But now that there was no realm protector in Azure Province, these people had no scruples at all. In front of the group of experts from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture stood a middle-aged man dressed rather coquettishly, and an outstanding, skinny old man. The middle-aged man was wearing a red robe and had thick makeup on his face. He looked very seductive. The skinny old man was wearing a large red robe. On his red robe, there were some naked men and women. They looked very naked. At this moment, both of them were staring at Tuoba Yen, who was among the soldiers not far away. Their eyes were filled with undisguised greed and lust. The middle-aged man suddenly smiled evilly. "It really is an inner charm body. If it can be developed, tisk, the skinny old man grinned. "Indeed, a rare inner charm body. This old man is willing to die for it, haha." At this moment, the old woman behind Tuoba Yen suddenly stepped forward. "Everyone, His Majesty and State Scholar Yi Xian of the Jiang Kingdom look at each other. Please give him some face." "Yi Xian?" The middle-aged man frowned slightly. "What kind of rubbish is this? Never heard of it. P.S. It's 2019. I'm finally 18. Happy New Year to everyone. Finally, some readers say that I'm still updating my novel even though my family is in the hospital. I'm not a man. I'm the only one in the family who has some income from writing. The hospital fees are unimaginable to ordinary people. Also, my brother is studying at home, and I'm paying for his tuition. I have to make a living too. Sincerely, I hope some readers don't go against me. I also want to thank the readers who have always supported me, such as Drunken Hongchen, Seventh Sister, Licking 100, Xiaoyao Z, and some readers who give me monthly votes every day but don't say much. You guys can be more high profile. Finally, I'm lucky to have met you guys. Chapter 210. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the old woman behind Tuoba Yan's face sank. She didn't expect that these people wouldn't even give face to Yi Xian. It should be known that Yi Xian was undoubtedly the most famous in Qingzhou. Apart from Great Cloud Empire, Blue Waves Academy could be said to be the strongest force in Qingzhou. Apart from Blue Waves Academy, Yi Xian's strength was also very frightening. It could be said that Yi Xian had a certain deterrent force in the entire Qingzhou. However, she didn't expect that these people wouldn't give face at all. Yi Xian? At this moment, the red-robed old man beside the middle-aged man frowned slightly. The middle-aged man looked at the red-robed old man. Do you know this person, Brother Jiangyi? The old man named Jiangyi shook his head. I don't know him. I have only heard of him. It is said that he had a conflict with Dark World and Kuraki Academy. Kuraki Academy even sent experts to Qingzhou. As for the final result, I don't know. Result. Apart from Qingzhou, the matter of Kuraki Academy didn't spread to the Central Divine Continent. Because they had been suppressed by the Realm Protector, the death of 2 members of the Realm Protector Alliance was undoubtedly a great loss of face for the Realm Protector Alliance. They naturally wouldn't let this matter spread because it would affect the prestige of the Realm Protector Alliance. All along, Realm Protector Alliance couldn't be offended. But now, if people knew that 2 people from Realm Protector Alliance were killed, the prestige of Realm Protector Alliance would be greatly reduced in the hearts of people. Therefore, under the suppression of Realm Protector Alliance, except for a few major forces, no one knew what happened to Kuraki Academy. The coquettish middle-aged man suddenly smiled. Brother Jiangyi, rest assured. In Qingzhou, except for Great Cloud Empire, the other forces are just small shrimps. Without the Realm Protector, these forces are less than ants to us. Jiangyi nodded slightly. That's true. Then, he looked at Tuoba Yan not far away with an obscene smile. This woman has an inner charm physique. This physique is really rare and can't be missed. Moreover, the Ning country's national strength is not weak. After we capture this woman, the Ning country's national treasury and the entire Ning country will be ours. We will have both the people and the wealth, haha. The coquettish middle-aged man chuckled. That's true. I never thought that I would be able to become an emperor after coming to this tiny azure province, haha. With that, he took a step forward. With this step, an invisible pressure suddenly swept towards Tuoba Yan and the others. Behind Tuoba Yan, the old woman and the old man suddenly stepped forward. The old woman raised her hand and struck. Boom! The pressure released by the coquettish middle-aged man instantly dissipated. The middle-aged man's gaze landed on the old woman. He smiled and said, interesting. As he spoke, he turned to look at the 2 old men not far away. You too, since you're here, it's only natural for you to contribute. I'll leave these 2 to you. How about it? The 2 elders looked at each other and nodded. Sure. With that, the 2 of them charged toward the old woman and the old man behind Tuoba Yan. Behind Tuoba Yan, the old woman said in a deep voice, Take care, Your Majesty. As soon as she finished speaking, she and the old man beside her trembled, and they turned into a blur as they shot out. Soon, the 4 Dharma realm experts began fighting in the air. Below, the coquettish middle-aged man and Jiangyi walked towards Tuoba Yan. None of the soldiers flinched in front of Tuoba Yan. Although they knew that they were not even comparable to ants before the middle-aged man and the old man, they did not retreat. Behind them was the king of the Ning country, the person they were loyal to. Tuoba Yen was expressionless. That was because she was holding two talismans that emitted heat energy in her wide sleeves. The Blazing Explosion Talisman. It was equivalent to a heaven-grade spiritual weapon, but it was a one-time use item. Although it was a one-time use item, its power was extraordinary. If used well, it could even kill a Dharma realm expert. Of course, it would be difficult for her to live, or rather, she did not intend to live. Because she knew very well that living would be more painful than death. The coquettish middle-aged man moved closer and closer, and he didn't conceal the greed in his eyes as he gazed at Tuoba Yen. Tuoba Yen circulated her profound energy, and the pyroblast talismans in her hand shook violently and were about to explode. Meanwhile, a ray of light suddenly descended from the sky. Everyone in the surroundings looked up into the sky in succession. Tuoba Yen looked up as well. The speed of the sword light was extremely fast, like a falling meteor, incomparably swift. It didn't take long for the coquettish middle-aged man's expression to change. Because he noticed that the ray of light was actually targeting him. The middle-aged man's expression instantly turned icy cold, and then he tossed his right hand up lightly. In an instant, a pink ribbon shot into the sky and shot towards the ray of light. The sword arrived in midair. The pink ribbon forcefully blocked the ray of light, but it suddenly shook violently in the next moment. Bang! The pink ribbon was blasted flying back to the middle-aged man. Meanwhile, the ray of light had arrived above him. The middle-aged man's pupils constricted slightly. This time, he didn't choose to resist it head-on, and he flashed backward by over 30 m. He'd just retreated when a young man appeared in front of Tuoba Yen. It was none other than Yi Xian. On the other hand, little demon Tuoba was sizing up the surroundings curiously by Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian pointed the spirit beauty sword at the middle-aged man nearby. Wait a moment. I'll be right back for your head. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at Tuoba Yen. At this moment, Tuoba Yen was looking at him as well. Yi Xian grinned. Surprised? Surprised? Tuoba Yen didn't speak, but the pyroblast talisman in her sleeve gradually calmed down. Yi Xian hugged Tuoba Yen lightly. Leave everything to me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the coquettish middle-aged man nearby. Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian's back silently. Meanwhile, little demon Tuoba suddenly walked over to Tuoba Yen and sized him up. Your surname Tuoba as well? Tuoba Yen looked at little demon Tuoba and nodded slightly. Little demon Tuoba grinned. What a coincidence. My surname is also Tuoba. Tuoba Yen was speechless. Not far away, Yi Xian walked towards the coquettish middle-aged man with the spirit beauty sword in his hand. At this moment, the spirit beauty sword was already middle grade. After devouring 8 swords, he did not reach the divine union realm. Hence, he looked for the 6th floor master to buy a true grade sword and 3 bright grade superior grade swords for him. He exchanged 2 heaven grade cultivation techniques for these 4 swords. To be honest, he felt his heart ache and was somewhat reluctant to part with 2 heaven grade martial techniques. However, he had no choice. He had to part with them even if he was reluctant. He had to reach the divine union realm. Only by reaching the divine union realm could he fight against a myriad Dharma realm expert. After devouring close to 11 bright grade superior grade swords and 1 true grade sword, he reached the divine union realm. Not only did he reach the divine union realm, but the spirit beauty sword also reached middle grade. After breaking through to the divine union realm, he wanted to find someone to spar with. He wanted to see if there was still a gap between him and the myriad Dharma realm. Opposite Yi Xian, the coquettish middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and narrowed his eyes. Swordmaster. You. Yi Xian suddenly raised his sword and charged forward. In an instant, a ray of sword light reached the center of the coquettish middle-aged man's brows. The speed of this sword was extraordinarily fast. Even the myriad Dharma realm middle-aged man's expression changed when he saw the speed and power of this sword. The middle-aged man suddenly opened his palm. In an instant, countless tiny pink ribbons flew out from his palm. These pink ribbons instantly wrapped around the spirit beauty sword in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian's sword could no longer advance. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly released his hand and threw a punch at the middle-aged man's head. A sinister look flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. He did not dodge. Instead, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at Yi Xian's punch. Bam! The moment their fists collided, an explosion was heard. Yi Xian was sent flying. However, the moment Yi Xian was sent flying, Yi Xian's right hand suddenly grabbed the hilt of the spirit beauty sword. With the middle-aged man's strength, the spirit beauty sword broke free from the pink ribbons. At this moment, Yi Xian had already retreated 10 feet away. As soon as he stopped, Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and dashed forward. When Yi Xian charged at the middle-aged man, the spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly exploded with a terrifying sword force. When he arrived at a position about 10 feet away from the middle-aged man, he raised his sword and slashed down. One sword to decide life and death. At this moment, the force in his sword grew like a volcano eruption. The power of this sword instantly surpassed the myriad Dharma realm and approached the Dharma defensive realm. When he saw Yi Xian's sword, the middle-aged man was shocked. This was because this sword had greatly exceeded his expectations. This wasn't a power that a divine union realm cultivator could achieve. Not daring to think too much, the middle-aged man hurriedly took half a step back. In the next moment, countless pink ribbons suddenly swept out from his body. These pink ribbons carried a pink air current that instantly drowned Yi Xian and his sword. There was a moment of silence. Boom! Those pink ribbons suddenly exploded. Immediately after, a figure retreated rapidly. It was the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man retreated for a full 10 feet without stopping. Along the way, the ground he retreated exploded inch by inch, forming a gully that was 10 feet deep. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. A divine union realm cultivator sent a myriad Dharma realm cultivator flying? Everyone was in disbelief. On the battlefield, after Yi Xian sent the middle-aged man flying, he didn't stop. The spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly turned into a sword light and entered the sword case on his back. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly pointed at the middle-aged man. Hiss! A ray of sword light flashed. It was so fast that even the old man Jiang Yi couldn't see the trajectory of the sword clearly. The moment the spirit beauty sword flew out, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He put his hands together and was about to attack, but at this moment, hiss! A sword had pierced through his forehead. The battlefield fell silent. Yi Xian walked to the middle-aged man with the sword case on his back. The middle-aged man hadn't died yet, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly punched the middle-aged man's face. Bang! The middle-aged man's head exploded before he could finish speaking, and blood splattered everywhere. Yi Xian sheathed the spirit beauty sword and said indifferently, "I'll kill whoever dares to touch my people." As soon as he finished speaking, he took the man's storage ring and turned to leave. Everyone, Genius 1 second to remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 211. A deathly silence filled the area. A divine union realm expert killing a myriad Dharma realm expert. Everyone was stunned. After all, there was a world of difference between a myriad Dharma realm expert and a divine union realm expert. No one would find it strange if a Nether Passage realm expert killed a Divine Union realm expert, because the gap between the two realms wasn't that great. However, the gap between the Divine Union realm and the Myriad Dharma realm was enormous, and there was a qualitative difference. But now, a Divine Union realm expert had killed a Myriad Dharma realm expert right in front of them. Elder Jiangyi of the Joyful Union sect stared fixedly at Yi Xian, a solemn expression in his eyes. In Azure Province, it was extremely difficult for a Divine Union realm expert to kill a Myriad Dharma realm expert, or perhaps it was practically impossible. But in the distant Divine Central Continent, it wasn't rare for a Divine Union realm expert to kill a Myriad Dharma realm expert. In theory, it was extremely possible for those in the top 10 of the monster rankings to do so. As for those in the top 5, they had a 100% chance of doing so. This meant that Yi Xian was at least at the level of those in the top 10 of the monster rankings. How could such a person be ordinary? But he was truly unwilling to give up now. A good cauldron was simply too important to their sect. Moreover, the Ning Kingdom had an enormous amount of wealth. He was truly unwilling to give up just like that. The solemn expression in Jiang Ye's eyes turned icy cold. The experts from the Divine Central Continent all looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions, and some of them didn't even bother concealing their killing intent. The Ning Kingdom's enormous wealth was right in front of them, so how could they give up just like that? Some of the native descendants of the Ning Kingdom did indeed intend to retreat. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow, and Yi Xian's prestige in Azure Province was undoubtedly great. News of Yi Xian charging into the Chu Kingdom's imperial palace alone and killing the kings of the Chu Kingdom and the Yu Kingdom had practically spread throughout Azure Province. Who wouldn't fear him? Even Kuraki Academy was helpless against Yi Xian. Jiang Yi spoke abruptly when he saw the intention to retreat. The kingdom of Ning is a kingdom at any rate. How much wealth does it have accumulated? If you give up now, how long do you think you can survive in this Azure Province where the spiritual qi is exhausted? The others in the surroundings exchanged glances when they heard this, and they were slightly hesitant. Jiang Yi continued, he's just a divine combination realm cultivator. We have so many people on our side, why should we be afraid of him? Let's join forces to eliminate this person and share the wealth of the Ning nation. Isn't that perfect? The others in the surroundings were instantly tempted when they heard Jiang Yi. The wealth of the Ning Kingdom. What was the purpose of these people coming here? Naturally, it was for money. In this era of spiritual energy depletion, the most important thing was to stay alive, and to stay alive, one needed spirit stones, a lot of spirit stones. What are you afraid of? Right at this moment, a man suddenly stood out. He stared fixedly at Yi Xian who was not far away and said fiercely, isn't it just Yi Xian? He doesn't have 3 heads and 6 arms. There are so many of us. If we work together to kill him, but... The man's voice stopped abruptly because a sword had suddenly appeared between his brows. The sword had appeared out of nowhere, and everyone was stunned. Only Jiang Yi and the other experts of the Dharma realm knew how the sword had appeared. The sword had flown out from the sword box on Yi Xian's back, and it was too fast. It was so fast that they could only see a blurry trajectory. At this moment, they realized that the sword was a mid-grade truth rank sword, and the sword box on Yi Xian's back was truth rank as well. A set of divine equipment. Under the gazes of everyone, Yi Xian walked over to the man who spoke earlier. Yi Xian grinned, the wind was too strong earlier, so I didn't hear what you said clearly. Can you say it again? The man looked at Yi Xian, and there was a mark on his forehead. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Cold sweat flowed down his back. He knew that Yi Xian was very strong, but he hadn't imagined that Yi Xian was strong to this extent that he couldn't even fight back. He shouldn't have stood out. At this moment, the man was filled with regret. Not daring to think too much, the man revealed an unnatural smile. Yi, state scholar Yi, Yi Xian's sword suddenly stabbed forward. Qi. The spirit-elegant sword instantly pierced between the man's brows, and the man's voice stopped abruptly. The man's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with resentment. Yi Xian said softly, "Sorry, my hand shook a little. Please forgive me." Don't forgive me? Hit me then." The man's body was trembling from anger. Yi Xian didn't waste any more time. He drew the spirit-elegant sword and turned to walk toward Tuoba Yen. Behind him, blood spurted out from between the man's brows, and he fell to the ground in an instant. Countless people in the field had expressions of fear. Even Jiang Yi had a trace of fear in his eyes. Even he had to be wary of Yi Xian's strength because his strength was similar to that of the coquettish middle-aged man from before. Since Yi Xian had the ability to kill the coquettish middle-aged man, then Yi Xian had the ability to kill him as well. That was why he hadn't made a move until now. Wait. Wait for someone to come. Yi Xian walked over to Tuoba Yen, and Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian suddenly stretched out his hand and gently stroked Tuoba Yan's face, and he said softly, "You've lost a lot of weight since we parted that day." Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian in silence, but her hands were slowly clenched tightly within her sleeves. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at a soldier by Tuoba Yan's side. "Get a chair for my Yen, Don't let her tire herself out." The soldier was stunned, and then he hurriedly turned around and ran over. It didn't take long for a few soldiers to carry a dragon chair over to Tuoba Yan's back. Yi Xian wrapped his arms around Tuoba Yan's shoulders and made her sit on the dragon chair. Tuoba Yen still remained silent. Meanwhile, Tuoba Yen suddenly walked over to Tuoba Yen and grinned, "I'm tired as well. Let's squeeze." As she spoke, she sat down by Tuoba Yan's side. The dragon chair was very large, and it was entirely capable of seating 2 people. Yi Xian raised his head and glanced up into the sky. At this moment, the 4 Dharma realm experts were still locked in battle, and both sides were evenly matched. Yi Xian was just about to attack when a strand of divine sense suddenly pressed down upon him. It was the pressure of Jiang Ye's divine sense. Yi Xian gazed at Jiang Yi who stood nearby. "Then I'll deal with you first." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot on the ground. The instant his foot touched the ground, his entire body transformed into a shadow that shot out explosively. At the same time, a strand of sword light instantly arrived before Jiang Yi. Jiang Yi, who was aware of Yi Xian's strength, naturally didn't dare to be careless. At the moment Yi Xian attacked, a red mirror suddenly appeared in his hand. His profound energy surged into the mirror, and the red mirror trembled slightly. A strand of red light surged out like a blazing flame, instantly drowning Yi Xian's sword light. Boom! 2 figures retreated repeatedly. It was Yi Xian and Jiang Yi. Countless sword lights and flames sputtered between the 2 of them, and the ground around them was a mess. As for the others in the surroundings, they retreated explosively and didn't dare to get too close. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly flew into the sword case behind him. In the next moment, Yi Xian took a step forward and pointed a finger forward. Swish! A strand of sword light slashed through the battlefield. At the moment the sword light appeared, Jiang Ye's expression changed drastically. He suddenly let go of the red mirror in his right hand, and his left hand formed a strange seal. In an instant, the red mirror before him actually started burning. This chapter isn't finished, please continue. Rise! Meanwhile, Yi Xian's flying sword had arrived, and it directly slashed onto the burning red mirror. Bang! A strand of dark red flames suddenly erupted from the red mirror. However, the flames weren't able to devour Yi Xian's sword light. Conversely, The flames were directly suppressed by Yi Xian's sword light as soon as they appeared. For a time, the sword and mirror were actually in a stalemate. But in next to no time, the spirit grace sword suddenly flew back and directly entered the sword case behind Yi Xian. But in the next moment, it flew out once more, and this time, its speed was even faster than before. This sword slashed onto the red mirror once more. Bang! Along with an explosion, the red mirror was blasted flying, and Jiang Yi was blasted flying as well. The red mirror carried Jiang Yi along as it flew over 100 m away, yet Jiang Yi hadn't stopped when a sword slashed over once more like a bolt of lightning. Jiang Yi's expression changed drastically, and he raised the red mirror with both hands and pushed it forward. Bang! The red mirror shook violently and directly cracked apart. At the same time, Jiang Yi and the cracked red mirror were blasted over 100 m away once more. As soon as he stopped, the spirit grace sword slashed over once more. Jiang Yi was horrified in his heart. At this moment, he had no other choice but to use the red mirror to block it once more. The sword arrived. Bang! The red mirror shook violently, and then it directly exploded apart. The formidable force instantly blasted Jiang Yi, who was behind the red mirror flying over 30 m away. However, he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian suddenly charged forward swiftly with his sword in hand. This charge directly arrived above Jiang Yi, and then he suddenly slashed down with the spirit grace sword in both hands. A single strike to decide life and death. There was no doubt that this strike was meant to kill with a single strike. Sensing the power in Yi Xian's strike, Jiang Yi was horrified. He pulled with both hands, and a golden talisman suddenly appeared above his head. Yi Xian's sword happened to slash onto this talisman. Bang! With a loud explosion, Yi Xian's entire body was blasted away. Over 100 m away, Yi Xian had just landed on the ground when the ground beneath his feet cracked open. A smear of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and raised his head to look at Jiang Yi, who wasn't far away. At this moment, the golden talisman in front of Jiang Yi had already started burning and was slowly disappearing. Jiang Yi's heart was bleeding as he watched the golden talisman slowly disappear. He had spent close to 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones to purchase this life-saving golden talisman. 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones. In the past, 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones wasn't considered a lot, but now, 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. The loss was too great. Jiang Yi raised his head to look at Yi Xian, who wasn't far away, and said fiercely, "You meddlesome be****, this old man will definitely tear you to pieces." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned his head to look at the distant palace. There, close to 100 cavalrymen were galloping over, and wherever they passed, the ground would directly burn. And the leader was a woman in silver armor. Seeing this scene, Jiang Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he suddenly laughed out loud. "Yi Xian, although my people haven't arrived yet, there are many who want your Ning kingdom to perish. This cavalryman's momentum is like a rainbow, and one look and you can tell that they are the elites of 100 battles. This Ning kingdom is doomed. P.S. Today, a reader found me and scolded me as soon as he added me. He said that I was shameless and plagiarized the invincible sword realm. He even showed me a screenshot and said that the World Prison Pagoda appeared in the invincible sword realm. He said that I didn't have a profession to obtain it, so I can't create it." I was stunned for a long time. In the end, I found out that what he saw was a pirated version, and the author of the pirated version was actually not me. I said that the invincible sword realm was written by me, but he didn't believe me. Moreover, he even wanted to report me. What should I do? Waiting online. End of this chapter. Chapter 212. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned slightly strange when he heard Jiang Ye's words. Outside the imperial palace, the cavalrymen marched in an orderly manner, and every single one of them emanated a fierce murderous aura as if they were born to kill. Just their murderous aura was enough to strike fear into the hearts of others. The cavalrymen were similar to the Black Flame Army of Great Cloud Empire, but there were also differences because they cultivated the unique murderous aura technique. The greater the murderous intent of the murderous aura technique, the stronger their combat strength would be. Even though there were only 100 of them, the aura and murderous intent they emanated was enough to move even the experts from the Central Divine Prefecture. They weren't weaker than some of the Dao soldiers of the Central Divine Prefecture. The cavalrymen were very swift, and they arrived in front of Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Besides the silver-armored woman in the lead, all the other soldiers knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Dean." Their voices were deafening like a bell. Dean? Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck. Are they Yi Xian subordinates? Yi Xian felt rather gratified when he sensed the aura and imposing manner of the Dao soldiers of Blue Waves Academy. This was a Dao soldier that he had spent a great deal of effort to forge. He had spent a great deal of effort to forge this Dao soldier, and this Dao soldier did not disappoint him. It could be said that these Dao soldiers weren't the slightest bit weaker than the Black Flame Army of Great Cloud Empire. Meanwhile, the silver-armored woman walked over to Yi Xian. She wore a helmet and a mask, so only her eyes could be seen. She was naturally Jiangjiu, the commander of the cavalrymen. Jiangjiu sized up Yi Xian, divine combination realm? Yi Xian nodded, I just arrived. Jiangjiu nodded slightly, you're the dean, so give the order. Yi Xian grinned and was about to speak, but little demon Tuoba suddenly coughed lightly, and then she walked over to Yi Xian's side with a slightly solemn expression. Little demon Tuoba. Yi Xian suddenly came to his senses and hastily introduced, Little Nine, and everyone else, let me introduce you. This person beside me is called Little Demon Tuoba. She comes from the Central Divine Continent and is ranked 8th on the Demon-level Geniuses list. Right, she is also the Vice Dean of our Blue Waves Academy. When you see her, you must show the same respect as when you see me. The cavalrymen were startled, but they quickly regained their senses. They rose to their feet and bowed deeply at Little Demon Tuoba. Greetings, Vice Dean. A satisfied smile instantly arose on the corners of Tuoba's mouth when she saw everyone greet her. She nodded and spoke in a slightly old-fashioned manner, there's no need to be so courteous. At this point, she suddenly looked at Yi Xian and whispered, what should I say next? Yi Xian said seriously, let them kill all the people from the Divine Central Continent. Little Monster Tuoba nodded. Actually, I think so too. Yi Xian, Little Demon Tuoba suddenly pointed angrily at the experts from the Divine Central Continent in the distance. You scoundrels, instead of staying in the Divine Central Continent, you came to Azure Prefecture to commit evil. Do you still have a conscience? Do you still have humanity? I'm telling you, the weather will be cloudy today. At this point, she hastily looked at Yi Xian. What should I say next? Everyone, Yi Xian's face was also full of black lines. Don't say anything else. Let's fight. Little Demon Tuoba shook her head. No, I've read a book. It says that before a battle, momentum is very important. We must overwhelm them with momentum. Just watch me. At this point, she turned to look at the nearby experts from the Divine Central Continent. I'm telling you, what you're doing is wrong, you, cut the F***king crap. At this moment, a man suddenly stepped forward and said fiercely, if you want to fight, let's fight. What's with all the nonsense? There are so many of us, do you think we're afraid of you? You. Right at this moment, Little Demon Tuoba suddenly tossed the hammer in his hand. Bang! The man didn't even have time to react before he was blasted flying. In midair, his body exploded into pieces, and blood sprayed everywhere. Everyone, little demon Tuoba glanced coldly at the battlefield, and she was very angry. I'd intended to subdue the enemy without a fight, but now it would seem like all of you trash don't deserve to live. As soon as she finished speaking, she charged forward with her hammer in hand. The blue-tied Dao soldiers charged after her as well. The experts from the divine central continent turned pale when they saw little demon Tuoba and the blue-tied Dao soldiers charge at them, and some even had the intention to retreat. Meanwhile, Jiang Yi suddenly spoke angrily from nearby, "We have 600 to 700 people, and they only have 100. Why should we be afraid of them? The weakest equipment these cavalrymen wear is at the light grade. If we kill them, all of us will become rich. Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. As for the experts from the divine central continent, they hesitated for a moment, but in the end, they couldn't resist the temptation of becoming rich, and they charged forward. In terms of numbers, Yi Xian's side was at a disadvantage indeed. However, it was only a disadvantage in terms of numbers. In terms of quality, Yi Xian's side had an advantage. Especially when they had little demon Tuoba. Although this girl was a little heartless, she was really strong. Even he didn't dare say that he could defeat her with absolute certainty. Little demon Tuoba took the lead and charged into the crowd. She swung her hammer wildly, and over a dozen people died on the spot in an instant. No one could withstand a single hit from her hammer. After all, she was a monster in the top 10 of the genius level rankings. As for the blue-tied Dao soldiers, they could be said to be invincible. They charged wildly, and no one could stop them wherever they passed. Not only were the blue-tied Dao soldiers powerful individually, but their equipment was also extremely terrifying. Ordinary experts couldn't harm them at all. The battle had just begun, but the situation was already clear. More than 100 blue-tied Dao soldiers were forcefully suppressing hundreds of experts from the divine central continent. In truth, apart from the blue-tied Dao soldiers' own strength and little demon Tuoba's, there was another reason. The experts from the divine central continent weren't organized, and they scattered as soon as they charged. Moreover, each of them harbored ulterior motives and wanted others to risk their lives while they reaped the benefits. When facing an ordinary army, they were naturally successful in every endeavor because their individual strength far surpassed that of ordinary soldiers, and they could win easily. However, what they encountered now was a team of well-trained Dao soldiers with incomparably powerful individual strength. There was only one thought in the minds of these blue-tied Dao soldiers: kill. Jiang Yi charged at the front. His target was the blue-tied Dao soldiers, but before he could make a move, Yi Xian charged in front of him with a sword in hand and slashed down viciously. Bam! Jiang Yi was sent flying nearly 1,000 feet away. As soon as he stopped, a flying sword suddenly flew out from the sword case on Yi Xian's back. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword was in front of him. A flying sword again. Jiang Yi was horrified. This time, he didn't dare to take the blow head-on. He forcefully dodged to the left, but he was still a little too slow. Rip! An arm flew off, blood spurting out like a fountain. After the elegant spirit sword severed Jiang Ye's arm, it immediately flew back into the sword case. The sword didn't fly out again because Jiang Yi had already retreated outside the imperial palace, putting a considerable distance between them. Although the flying sword could reach him at this distance, its power would be greatly reduced. Jiang Yi stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Aside from resentment, there was also deep fear in his eyes. Yi Xian's flying sword was too terrifying. At this moment, the experts from the divine central continent were beginning to crumble. After witnessing the terror of the blue-tied Dao soldiers, some of the experts from the divine central continent had already begun to flee. They were here to seek wealth, not to throw away their lives. When they saw someone flee, the remaining people immediately lost their will to fight and began to flee as well. Thus, some of the experts from the divine central continent fled, while others died. Jiang Ye's expression was extremely unsightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. Jiang Ye's expression changed drastically, and he didn't even think about it before drifting back. He retreated 50 to 60 meters, and as soon as he stopped, Yi Xian appeared where he had been standing earlier. The distance between the two of them was still very large. Yi Xian frowned. With his current strength, he could defeat an expert of the myriad Dharma realm, but if Jiang Yi didn't fight and just kept dodging, then he really couldn't do anything to him. Ignoring Jiang Yi, Yi Xian turned around. The elegant spirit sword suddenly flew over 30 meters away from the sword case on his back, and the sword pierced through the forehead of an expert from the divine central continent. It didn't take long for almost 200 corpses to appear on the battlefield. The rest of the experts from the divine central continent had fled. As for the disciples of the Ning kingdom, they'd fled when they saw that Jiang Yi was no match for Yi Xian. They knew that with Yi Xian around, the Ning kingdom wouldn't perish for the time being. In the air, the two myriad Dharma realm experts from the divine central continent stopped as well. There was no point in continuing the battle. However, the two of them and Jiang Yi didn't leave. Yi Xian couldn't be bothered with the three of them. He put away the elegant spirit sword and faced the nearby little monster Tuoba. "Little monster, take our brothers and clean up the battlefield." Little monster Tuoba grinned brilliantly. All right. As she spoke, she glanced at the Blue Waves Dao soldiers behind her. "Clean up the battlefield." Everyone bowed slightly. If they'd respected little monster Tuoba before because of Yi Xian, then now, they respected her from the bottom of their hearts. This woman was truly too powerful. It could be said that without little monster Tuoba, it would have been impossible for them to end the battle so quickly. Little monster Tuoba had dealt with most of the stronger experts, and the experts from the divine central continent had been extremely wary of her. One strike to kill one. Who wouldn't be wary? In the azure firmament world, only the strong were worthy of respect. Little monster Tuoba was very proactive in cleaning up the battlefield. She'd already fallen in love with the feeling of robbing others. When Yi Xian arrived in front of Tuoba Yen, the golden insignia guards who'd been blocking Tuoba Yen's path immediately moved aside. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly took out a glowing scroll and handed it to her. Thunder Rush Incantation, a heaven-grade martial technique. This is for you. A heaven-grade martial technique. Tuoba Yen was stunned. Chapter 213. Heaven-grade martial skill. Not only Tuoba Yen, but many people were also stunned. Even the two 10,000 Dharma realm experts behind Tuoba Yen were taken aback. A heaven-ranked martial skill was extremely rare. It was truly priceless. It should be known that the imperial family of Ning country did not have a heaven-grade martial skill even after so many years. Not to mention Ning country, in the entire Qingzhou, only Kuraki Academy and Great Cloud Empire had it. But now, Yi Xian just casually gave it away. This was not ordinary generosity. Tuoba Yen looked straight at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian smiled and asked, "What's wrong?" "Why?" Tuoba Yen asked. "Why?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He placed the scroll of heaven-grade martial skill in Tuoba Yan's hand. "There's no why. Just give it to me if you like it. It's that simple." Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian for a long time. Finally, she put away the scroll of heaven-grade martial skill. At this moment, little monster Tuoba had also finished cleaning up the battlefield. She smiled and came to Yi Xian, "Little Yi, this time's harvest is not bad. Yi Xian said with a smile, tell me about it. Tuoba's smile became brighter and brighter. There are 2.9 billion gold coins and more than 7 million supreme-grade spirit stones. There are 17 clear-grade weapons and 72 supreme-grade spirit artifacts. There are also a lot of miscellaneous items, but none of them are very valuable. More than 7 million top-grade spirit stones. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Although this was not as much as what he obtained in Kuraki Academy, it was still a lot. Especially at this time, 7 million top-grade spirit stones was really an astonishing wealth. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, Little Monster, take out 1/3 and distribute it to the brothers. Little Monster Tuoba glanced at the Blue Waves Dao soldiers not far behind her and immediately nodded, okay. As she spoke, she began to distribute. Those Blue Waves cavalrymen looked at each other in blank dismay. Obviously, they didn't expect that Yi Xian would allocate a sum of money to them. One should know that in Blue Waves Academy, they actually received military pay every month. Not only that, Blue Waves Academy also spent a huge amount of money to provide them with martial skills, equipment, elixirs, and cultivation resources. Their treatment was already very good. At this time, one of the Blue Waves cavalrymen suddenly stood up, Dean, we have already taken enough, there is no need for these. Although they were a little tempted, they knew that they couldn't be too greedy. If he was too greedy, he might lose everything in the end. Yi Xian smiled and said, all of you have contributed, so these are what you deserve. Not only this time, but for any future missions, if there are any spoils of war, you will get 1/3 of it. The remaining 2/3 will belong to the academy. Yes, it's decided. That cavalryman still wanted to say something, but Little Monster Tuoba suddenly threw a storage ring to him, all of you have contributed previously, so this is what you deserve. There is no need to say anything more. Seeing that Yi Xian had already made up his mind, that Blue Waves cavalryman didn't say anything else. After putting away the storage ring, over 100 Blue Waves cavalrymen bowed deeply to Yi Xian, then quietly retreated to the side. At this time, Tuoba Yen suddenly asked, can I borrow your Dao soldiers? Yi Xian looked at Tuoba Yen, and Tuoba Yen said, there are some experts from the Central Divine Continent in the city, ordinary soldiers can't deal with them. Yi Xian nodded, let your people take 50 cavalrymen to the city to clean up. You, Little Jiao, the two of you follow me, I have something to discuss with you. Jiang Jiao suddenly pointed at Jiang Ye's group of 3 at the distant palace gate, what about them? Jiang Ye's group of 3 hadn't left, but the 3 of them stayed far away and didn't dare to approach. They were truly fearful of Yi Xian's flying sword. The old woman behind Tuoba Yen suddenly said, it's fine, the 2 of us will just keep an eye on them. Yi Xian nodded, then walked towards the distant Imperial Palace Hall with Tuoba Yen and Jiang Jiao. Little Monster Tuoba didn't follow them, instead quietly sneaking out of the palace. Previously, she had heard Tuoba Yen say that there were still many experts from the Central Divine Continent in the city, how could she let go of this opportunity? In the nearby palace hall, Jiang Jiao glanced behind him, your friend seems to have left the palace. Yi Xian smiled, don't worry about her, even the myriad Dharma realm can't do anything to her. 8th on the demon level list. Let alone in the Azure province, even in the Central Divine Continent, no one would dare to provoke such a figure. Moreover, Little Monster Tuoba's background was obviously not simple, he wouldn't believe that she didn't have any life-saving trump cards. The doors to the hall closed, leaving only the 3 of them seated around a table. Jiang Jiao and Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said in a low voice, I want to form another Dao soldier, not an ordinary one, but a super one. I don't need too many people, just 10, but they must be the best. Not only must their individual strength be the best, but the equipment they use must be the best as well. Jiang Jiao said in a low voice, the best? You want to equip them with truth-grade equipment? Yi Xian nodded. Tuoba Yen and Jiang Jiu exchanged a glance when they heard this, and there was a trace of shock in their eyes. Truth-grade equipment. The two women fell silent. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. In truth, he knew that it was slightly insane. A piece of true-grade equipment was also priceless. After all, the sword box on his back cost nearly 3 billion gold coins. He still owed Drunken Immortal over 20 million supreme-grade spirit stones. Although the things swordsmen used were more expensive, a piece of truth-grade equipment cost at least 15 million supreme-grade spirit stones. 15 million supreme-grade spirit stones. For the current situation, this was a very shocking number. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "If we want to equip them with truth-grade spirit weapons, even if my Ning country and the Jiang country join forces, it will be difficult. Moreover, even if we do manage to do it, we will probably have to use all the strength of our countries. With the current situation, if we use all the strength of our countries, the gains might not make up for the losses, and the two countries might even be forcefully dragged down." Jiang Jiu nodded. King Tuoba is right. Truth-grade equipment is truly too precious. Yi Xian suddenly said, "How about this? I will be responsible for the money, and you two can be in charge." The two women looked at Yi Xian, and Jiang Jiu frowned slightly. "Where are you going to get so much money?" Yi Xian smiled. "I have my ways. You two are responsible for choosing people for me. The Jiang country will choose 5 people, the Ning country will choose 5 people, and the Jiang country will choose 5 people. If there are more, that's fine too. Little Jiu, if you want to choose people, choose from the Dao soldiers, the elites of the Dao soldiers. Yen, you choose the same people. Choose the most outstanding people of your Ning country. After you choose, I will personally test them. Only when I nod my head will they be qualified." Saying this, he placed his hands on the table and softly said, "I want the elites of the elites." Although the Blue Wave's Dao soldiers were not bad, it was still not enough. He needed a sharp knife that could pierce through everything. Especially in this chaotic era, he needed a super Dao soldier that could deal with anything. And this Dao soldier, he couldn't build it by himself. He needed the full support of the Ning country and the Jiang country, and also the intoxicated immortal building. Even with the support of these 3 powers, he wasn't completely sure that he could build it. But, he wanted to take a gamble. Currently, even if he found 20 truth-grade swords, he still wouldn't be able to break through to 10,000 Laws realm. Because he had just reached Divine Unity realm, his realm was basically unstable. Even if he could, he didn't dare to break through to 10,000 Laws realm at this time, it was too impatient. Haste makes waste, he still understood the logic of haste. Now, the most important thing for him was to stabilize his realm, then break through to 10,000 Laws realm. And during this period, he just happened to be able to develop the Dao soldiers of Blue Wave's Academy and build a super Dao soldier. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly looked at Yi Xian, "Are you serious?" Yi Xian nodded, "This Azure province can't fall into chaos, at least our Jiang country and Ning country can't fall into chaos, and in order to not fall into chaos, we need powerful strength. I alone am far from enough." Tuoba Yen suddenly took out a purple storage ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. She didn't say anything. "This is?" Yi Xian asked. Tuoba Yen indifferently said, 30 million top-grade spirit stones. Hearing this, Yi Xian and Jiang Jiu were dumbfounded. 30 million top-grade spirit stones. Naturally, Yi Xian was somewhat shocked, because this was even more than what he obtained in Kuraki Academy. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, Tuoba Yen explained, "My Ning country's successive kings will save a private sum of wealth, this wealth will be accumulated from generation to generation, and this wealth can only be used at the Ning country's most critical moment. Yi Xian solemnly said, "This is your Ning country's life-saving money. You give it to me." Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. "If not for you, Ning country would have perished long ago. However, you have to promise me, as long as you are alive, Ning country will not perish." Yi Xian nodded, "I promise you." Tuoba Yen nodded, no longer saying anything. At the side, Jiang Jiao suddenly said, "I will also return to Jiang country and ask my imperial father to take out some top-grade spirit stones, but it may not be too much, the current Jiang country is in a bit of trouble." Yi Xian softly said, "Okay. Then now, you can go pick people. Leave the rest to me." 15 minutes later, Jiang Jiao and Tuoba Yen left the main hall. Pick people. For the two women, what they needed to do now was to pick people. It was not a simple matter to pick 5 people from each country. Yi Xian did not leave. He waited for almost an hour, and an old man suddenly appeared in the hall. 5th floor head. Yi Xian took out a storage ring and handed it to the 5th floor head. "Everything in the storage ring will be exchanged for top-grade spirit stones." The 5th floor master glanced at the storage ring, and his expression changed. Because there was a heaven rank martial skill, close to 10 earth rank high rank martial skills, 2 true rank spirit artifacts, over 30 bright rank spirit artifacts, over 80 supreme rank spirit artifacts, and an assortment of other spirit artifacts. This was a shocking amount of wealth. Especially the heaven-grade martial skills and truth-grade spirit artifacts, they could be sold for an astronomical price. The 5th floor head did not say anything, and took the storage ring and left. After the 5th floor head left, Yi Xian entered the World Prison Pagoda and came to a corner. There, a sword was still trembling. A heaven-grade sword. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said softly, "Follow me for a year, and I will return your freedom. I will keep my promise." The sword did not respond. Yi Xian turned around and left. Just when Yi Xian was about to reach the door, the heaven-grade sword suddenly trembled and let out a sword cry. Yi Xian stopped. Great Cloud Empire. A woman stood on the city wall with her hands hidden in her sleeves. 2 black phoenix claws were embroidered on her sleeves. This person was Great Cloud Empire's backer, King Lian Wanli. In front of Lian Wanli stood an elder. The elder wore a pink robe that had men and women drawn on it. These men and women were hugging each other and doing indescribable things. The old man looked at Lian Wanli with a trace of fear in his eyes, because he had just exchanged blows with the woman before him. He was defeated in a single move. The old man cupped his fists at Lian Wanli. "Miss Lian, I have discussed with you about exterminating Yi Xian, Jiang country and Ning country. What do you think about it? Exterminate Yi Xian." Lian Wanli blinked. "What's there to think about? There's no need to think about it. I support your all-pleasure sect, a great deal." The old man was overjoyed. "Really?" Lian Wanli nodded seriously. "Really, more real than real gold. P.S. After watching the live broadcast, I suddenly realized that I can also be a streamer. Isn't it just singing, wearing revealing clothes and shaking my butt a few times? If I become a star streamer, you guys will come to support me. I'm serious. Because being a streamer makes a lot of money, there are always tycoons who spend tens of thousands. Moreover, I think I can sing and dance." Chapter 214. Qingzhou. The spirit energy in Qingzhou was decreasing day by day. Many places had completely dried up and turned into barren lands. Many large and small cities in the Green Province had also become empty cities. Flee. All of them fled to places with spiritual qi, hoping to survive. Many cities were empty, but many of them were overcrowded and overcrowded. Moreover, more and more cultivators from the divine central continent had entered Qingzhou to plunder. Qingzhou was now in an extraordinarily chaotic state. Great Cloud Empire. Lian Wanli stood quietly on the city wall of the Great Cloud Empire. Behind her stood a woman in armor with a long sword at her waist. Lian Wanli was dressed in a dark red dress that dragged on the ground. Around the dress were pieces of fiery red scales. Phoenix scales. These scales were extremely lifelike and lifelike. Lian Wanli looked into the distance. At the end of her line of sight was an endless mountain range, from which many people were desperately rushing towards the imperial capital. Because the imperial capital of the Great Cloud Empire had spirit energy. The gates of the imperial capital of the Great Cloud Empire were not closed, so these people could enter and leave freely. After a long time, Lian Wanli withdrew her gaze. Zhua, tell me about the situation. Zhua lowered her head slightly. Your Majesty, 30% of the territory of the Great Cloud Empire has completely lost spirit energy, and the remaining 30% is dissipating at an extremely fast rate. In a month at most, the spirit energy will be completely gone. She paused for a moment before continuing. In addition to this natural disaster, there is also a man-made disaster. Turmoil has broken out everywhere. Coupled with the barbaric invasion and wanton plundering of experts from the divine central continent, Qingzhou is in chaos. Lian Wanli lowered her eyes. After a moment, she asked again, how are the Jiang Kingdom and the Ning Kingdom? Zhua said solemnly, the situation is slightly better. Yi Xian won a complete victory in the battle of the Ning Kingdom. Now, many experts from the divine central continent do not dare to provoke him lightly. Of course, that is except for the Joyful Union sect and the Joyful sect. These two forces are determined to win over the king of the Ning Kingdom, Tuoba Yen. An inner charm body? Lian Wanli asked. Zhua shook her head. It's not that simple. That woman not only has an inner charm body, but her bloodline doesn't seem simple either. Bloodline. Lian Wanli looked at Zhua. Do you know what bloodline is? Zhua shook his head. I don't know yet. Lian Wanli was about to speak when suddenly, the sound of fighting came from below the city. She turned around and saw a group of people fighting below the city wall. After a moment of silence, Lian Wanli said softly, send out 100 black flame soldiers to patrol the city day and night. If there are any troublemakers, behead them immediately and hang their heads above the city gates. In addition, send 10 imperial guards to patrol the Great Cloud territory. If anyone dares to cause trouble, kill them on the spot. Zhua was alarmed by Lian Wanli's words. The king's imperial guard was the most mysterious and strongest army in Great Cloud Empire. She was a member of the king's guards. However, she had never known of the existence of others, and the others had never known of her existence. Not only that, she did not know how many people there were in the king's imperial guards. In the entire Great Cloud Empire, Lian Wanli was the only one who knew about this mysterious army, which only obeyed his orders. Meanwhile, Lian Wanli suddenly said, prepare a cloud ship for this king. Zhua was taken aback, where is His Majesty going? Lian Wanli said with a smile, I promised Union sect to help them eliminate Yi Xian. This king is not a person who goes back on his word. Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and a fox-like smile appeared on her lips. Zhua lowered her head slightly. She knew that her king must be up to something bad again. Ning country. Outside the capital of the Ning kingdom, Jiang Yi and 2 experts of the 10,000 Laws realm stood respectfully. In front of the 3 of them stood an old man. The old man wore a pink robe and exuded a pungent fragrance. This person was the vice sect master of Union sect. No one knew his name and only called him Old Man Union. Old Man Union glanced at Jiang Ye's shoulder. Is that Yi Xian really just a divine unity realm expert? Jiang Yi nodded, yes, but his battle strength is at least top 10 on the monster list. Top 10 on the monster list. Old Man Yunyan's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of seriousness in them. Does he have any backing? Jiang Yi spoke solemnly, supposedly, there is a sword immortal. A sword immortal. Old Man Yunyan suddenly turned to look at Jiang Yi, is that true? Jiang Yi hesitated for a moment and said, it should be true. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible for him to go against Kuraki Academy. However, I asked Kuraki Academy just now, and the dean said that the sword immortal was heavily injured by them and fled. Now, Kuraki Academy is pursuing her. Old Man Yunyan instantly heaved a sigh of relief, that's good. When he spoke up to this point, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, then why hasn't Kuraki Academy eliminated Yi Xian? Jiang Yi thought for a moment and said, according to my inference, the firmament world has suffered a sudden upheaval, and the spirit energy in it has dried up. So, Kuraki Academy has no time to care about Pine Prefecture. Now, they only want to stabilize the situation in the Central Divine Prefecture, so they don't have the energy to care about Yi Xian. Old Man Yunyan nodded, that makes sense. When he spoke up to this point, he raised his head and gazed at the nearby capital of the Kingdom of Peace, and there was a burning desire in his eyes. That woman doesn't just possess the inner charm physique, her bloodline is the Yin spirit bloodline that my joyful union sect dreams of obtaining. That bloodline has to be suppressed with extremely overbearing aphrodisiacs since a young age. Since she was able to survive until now, there's definitely a huge amount of yang flames accumulated within her. If I'm able to dual cultivate with her and devour her bloodline. Old Man Yunyan's hands trembled slightly when he spoke up to this point. However, he seemed to have thought of something and gradually calmed down once more. After a short moment of silence, Old Man Yunyan spoke solemnly, the sect master has said that we must obtain this woman. He'll immediately rush over once he's finished dealing with the matters in the Central Divine Prefecture. If he obtains this woman, then the sect master will definitely rise to greater heights. At that time, my joyful union sect status in the devil path will definitely rise greatly. Jiang Yi spoke solemnly, be careful of the Merry Gate. They haven't done anything lately, but they definitely won't miss such a rare opportunity. Old Man Yunyan nodded, the sect master will need at least 2 days to arrive in Azure Province. We can't wait that long. Once Great Cloud Empire's King Reliance Wanli arrives, we'll immediately rush into the city, kill Yi Xian, and capture that woman alive. That sword immortal. Jiang Yi was somewhat apprehensive. Old Man Yunyan spoke indifferently, it doesn't matter. Even if she escapes Kuraki Academy's pursuit, she won't dare appear in front of the sect master. She's just an injured sword immortal. The sect master can destroy her with a flick of his finger. Jiang Yi nodded, that's true. After saying that, his expression suddenly turned ferocious, if we capture that Yi Xian, please hand him over to me. This old man will make him wish he was dead. Old Man Yunyan glanced at Jiang Yi, when the time comes, it's up to you. Ning Empire's imperial capital, World Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. A sword floated in front of him. The sword was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide. The sword's entire body emitted a faint cold light. An unknown beast was drawn on the sword hilt. The beast's eyes were wide open and its expression was ferocious. Heaven-grade sword. A true heaven-grade treasure. Yi Xian held the sword hilt with his right hand. The sword trembled slightly but didn't resist. However, the spiritual energy in his body was depleting at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, the exquisite sword was trembling violently. This was a sign that it sensed danger. Sure enough, this sword wasn't something that the exquisite sword could contend against at the moment. It wasn't something that he could fully control at the moment. Yi Xian quickly let go of the sword. In this short period of time, the sword had already depleted 1/3 of the profound qi in his body. With his current strength, he could only use this sword 3 times at most. After 3 times, the spiritual energy in his body would definitely be depleted. As though he thought of something, Yi Xian quickly took out his sword case. Under his signal, the sword went straight into the sword case. The sword case trembled violently for a moment but quickly calmed down. About 15 minutes later, a smile appeared at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth because he realized that if he used this sword case, he could use the flying sword 5 times. 5 times. With his current strength, coupled with the true grade sword case and the heaven grade sword, as well as his own sword force and sword intent, there was a high chance that he could instantly kill a myriad Dharma realm practitioner. Of course, if the other party was fully on guard, it would be a little difficult. Of course, if one strike didn't work, he would use another. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly left the prison pagoda. In the main hall, Tuoba Yen walked in and walked up to Yi Xian. "They're here." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Leave everything to me." With that, he walked out of the main hall. Behind him, Tuoba Yen stared at Yi Xian's back in a daze. After Yi Xian walked out of the main hall, there were 5 people standing in the sky in the distance. All 5 of them were at the myriad Dharma realm, and he knew 2 of them. They were Jiang Yi and Lian Wanli, whom he'd severed an arm earlier. Yi Xian's face instantly sank when he saw Lian Wanli. What does this crazy woman want? In the air, Old Man Concord glanced at Yi Xian and was about to attack when he suddenly looked to the right. "I wonder who's from the joyful sect." As soon as Old Man Concord finished speaking, 3 old men suddenly appeared on the right. All of them were at the myriad Dharma realm. Old Man Concord's gaze descended onto the grey-robed old man in the lead, and his eyes narrowed slightly. "Ku Xiaotian, I didn't expect you to come in person." Ku Xiaotian, the Grand Elder of the Joyful Sect, the second in command of the Joyful Sect. The old man called Ku Xiaotian grinned. "How could my Joyful Sect let go of such a seductive woman?" As he spoke, his gaze shifted to Tuoba Yen below, and there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. "She really is an inner seductive body. Even in the divine central continent, it's rare to see one. I didn't expect it to appear in this tiny azure province." Old Man Concord said indifferently, "My Joyful Sect wants this woman." Ku Xiaotian laughed. "My Joyful Sect will never let her go." Old Man Concord was about to speak when the sword box behind Yi Xian shook violently. Then, a sword soared into the sky. Buzz! A sword's cry tore through the sky, resounding through the clouds. In the air, Old Man Concord and Ku Xiaotian's expressions changed drastically, and they both retreated rapidly. Jiang Yi was just a little bit slower, and just that little bit caused his head to fly off. The entire place instantly fell silent. Below, Yi Xian opened his left hand, and the heaven-grade sword appeared in his hand. He took out a silk handkerchief with his right hand and gently wiped the blood off the sword. He shook his head as he wiped, "So the myriad Dharma realm is so weak. I only used 30% of my strength." As he spoke, he looked up at Old Man Concord and the others in the air. "Why did you stop? Come, let's continue the discussion. Everyone, you're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.